Hello and welcome to the Fanfic Club, your home for amazing stories. Today's story is, What if Death itself appeared at Hogwarts to claim its stolen Hallow and declared Harry Potter as the true master of death at age 11? Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe if you haven't already. We post new stories regularly. Let's get started. Chapter 1, The Midnight Visitor. Snow fell gently outside the frost-laced windows of Gryffindor Tower, coating the grounds of Hogwarts in a pristine white blanket. The castle stood silent on Christmas morning, most students having departed for the holiday break. Harry Potter sat cross-legged on his four-poster bed, surrounded by a small pile of presents, the first real Christmas gifts he could remember receiving. "Go on then, open another," urged Ron Weasley, his freckled face alight with excitement as he tore through the wrapping of his own presents. Harry reached for a light, oddly shaped package with no card. The brown paper fell away to reveal something fluid and silvery gray that slithered to the floor where it lay in gleaming folds. "Blimey," Ron whispered, dropping the maroon sweater his mother had knitted him. "If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable." Harry lifted the shining, silvery cloth. It felt strange to the touch, like water woven into material. "It's an invisibility cloak," said Ron, his voice filled with awe. "Go on, try it on." Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders, and Ron let out a yell. "It is." "Look down." Harry glanced at his feet but saw nothing. He dashed to the mirror and sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head, and his reflection vanished completely. "There's a note," said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in narrow, loopy handwriting he had never seen before were the following words: "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you." No signature. Harry stared at the note, a strange warmth spreading through him despite the winter chill. Something that had belonged to his father. "I'd give anything for one of these," Ron said, admiring the cloak. "Anything. What's the matter?" "Nothing," said Harry, but it wasn't true. Something peculiar had happened when he first touched the cloak, a barely perceptible ripple in the air around him, as though the castle itself had taken a sharp breath. He dismissed the sensation as excitement. That night, after a magnificent Christmas feast in the Great Hall, Harry lay awake long after Ron's snores filled their dormitory. The invisibility cloak called to him from his trunk, an irresistible whisper of adventure. With the castle nearly empty for the holidays, it was the perfect chance to explore. Carefully, Harry slid out of bed and retrieved the cloak. As his fingers brushed the silvery material, that strange sensation returned, stronger this time, like the distant roll of thunder felt rather than heard. He hesitated for a moment, then wrapped the cloak around his shoulders. Instantly, a bone-deep chill ran through him, different from the winter cold, more ancient, more knowing. The corridors of Hogwarts were eerily quiet as Harry wandered, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of the cloak. Moonlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating suits of armor that seemed to follow him with invisible eyes. He had no particular destination in mind, simply reveling in the freedom the cloak provided. Eventually, Harry found himself in an unused classroom. Pushing the door open, he discovered something that made him forget about the cold and the late hour, a magnificent mirror, as tall as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame, standing on two clawed feet. An inscription was carved around the top, "Eris stra eru oit ube kafru oit onwosi." Curious, Harry stepped in front of the mirror, and nearly cried out in shock. He wasn't alone in the reflection. A crowd of people stood behind him, and when he turned, the room was empty. Heart pounding, he looked back at the mirror. A woman with dark red hair and bright green eyes, his eyes, smiled and waved at him. A tall, thin, black-haired man with glasses stood with his arm around her. He wore the same glasses as Harry. "Mom," he whispered. "Dad?" They just smiled. Harry stood rooted to the spot, staring at his family's faces. He had almost forgotten about the cloak, still draped around his shoulders. A voice spoke from the darkness behind him. I see you, like so many before you, have discovered the delights of the mirror of Erist. Harry whipped around. Sitting on one of the desks by the wall was Professor Dumbledore. Harry must have walked right past him, so desperate had he been to reach the mirror. I didn't see you, sir. Strange how nearsighted being invisible can make you, said Dumbledore, and Harry was relieved to see that he was smiling. The headmaster explained the mirror's purpose, to show the deepest, most desperate desires of one's heart. He cautioned Harry against searching for it again, as it would be moved the next day, and men had wasted away before it, entranced by what they saw. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, remember that, said Dumbledore gently. Now, why don't you put that admirable cloak back on and get off to bed? Harry nodded, pulling the cloak tighter around himself as they parted ways in the corridor. As Dumbledore's footsteps faded, Harry noticed something peculiar. The air around him seemed to thicken, heavy with a presence he couldn't explain. The torches lining the corridor dimmed slightly, their flames shrinking as though someone had exhaled softly upon them. He quickened his pace, the sensation of being watched prickling along his spine. The cloak, which had felt like a comforting embrace earlier, now seemed to weigh on his shoulders. With each step, he became increasingly certain that he wasn't alone. Harry Potter. The voice that spoke his name wasn't loud, yet it filled the corridor completely, deep and ancient, like stone grinding against stone. Harry froze, his breath catching in his throat. He was still invisible beneath the cloak, no one should be able to see him. I see you, child. I have always seen you. Slowly, Harry turned around. The corridor behind him was empty, and then, between one heartbeat and the next, it wasn't. A figure stood before him, tall and still. It wore robes of deepest black that seemed to drink in the torchlight rather than reflect it. Where there should have been a face beneath the hood, Harry saw only darkness, not the absence of features, but something more profound, as though he was looking into an endless void. Harry's mouth went dry. He wanted to run, but his legs refused to obey. Tentatively, he reached up and pulled the cloak from his head, revealing himself. Who are you? He managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure inclined its head slightly. I have many names. Some call me the end of all things. Others, the great equalizer. The voice was neither male nor female, young nor old. But you, Harry Potter, may call me Death. Harry's heart hammered against his ribs. This had to be a dream, some strange nightmare brought on by too much Christmas pudding. Yet the cold stone floor beneath his feet and the chill air around him felt painfully real. Death, he repeated weakly. Like, actual death. With a scythe and everything. A sound emerged from beneath the hood, a soft, dry chuckle that reminded Harry of autumn leaves skittering across stone. A common misconception. I appear as mortals expect me to appear. The scythe is a human invention, though sometimes I indulge them. As if to demonstrate, a gleaming silver scythe materialized in the figure's hand, its curved blade catching the torchlight. Before Harry could react, it vanished again. This cannot be real, Harry whispered. And yet it is. Death took a step closer. I have been watching you, Harry Potter. From the moment my Hallow came into your possession. Your Hallow. Death's robed arm extended, a bony finger pointing at the invisibility cloak still clutched in Harry's hands. That which you now hold, it once belonged to me. One of 3 gifts I bestowed upon 3 brothers, long ago. The cloak of true invisibility, woven from the fabric of night itself. It has passed through many hands over the centuries, but it remains mine, as do all things, eventually. Harry stared at the cloak with new appreciation and trepidation. If it's yours, why don't you just take it back? Because it has chosen you, as have I. Death's voice grew softer, almost reverent. You survived when no other has. You, who should have joined me that night in Godric's Hollow. You alone have ever truly escaped my embrace. A coldness that had nothing to do with the drafty corridor seeped into Harry's bones. You mean when Voldemort tried to kill me? When my parents died? Yes. That night, something unprecedented occurred. A piece of magic so profound that it rippled across the veil that separates my realm from yours. Death seemed to grow taller, the darkness within its hood deeper. Your mother's sacrifice created a protection I could not penetrate. And now, the Hallow has returned to you, the child who lived when he should not have. Harry clutched the cloak tighter. So what does that mean? It means, Harry Potter, Death said, its voice resonating through the stone walls, that you are the master of death. The words hung in the air between them, impossibly heavy. Harry shook his head, taking a step back. No. I'm just Harry. Just a first year. I can barely turn a match into a needle, I can't be the master of you. And yet, you are. Or rather, you shall be. Death moved closer, seeming to glide rather than step. The cloak is but one of 3 Hallows. United, they grant mastery over me to their wielder. You now possess one. The others will find their way to you, in time. I don't want them, Harry said quickly. I don't want to be the master of death. I just want, he faltered, unsure how to finish that sentence. To be normal. He had never been normal. To have his parents back. The mirror of Erist had already shown the impossibility of that desire. What you want, Death said gently, and what fate has designed for you are seldom aligned. But fear not, child. This is not a burden, it is a gift. Before Harry could respond, the air around them shimmered, and another voice cut through the corridor. Harry? Is that you? Harry whirled around to see Professor McGonagall approaching, her tartan dressing gown pulled tight around her thin frame, her face stern. Professor, Harry began, turning back to where Death had stood. But the corridor behind him was empty, the entity had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Mr. Potter. Wandering the corridors at this hour, after Professor Dumbledore explicitly asked you to return to your dormitory? McGonagall's nostrils flared dangerously. Explain yourself. I saw, there was, Harry stammered, clutching the invisibility cloak. How could he possibly explain what had just happened? Would anyone even believe him? I got lost, he finally said, the lie feeling hollow on his tongue. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. The castle can indeed be confusing to navigate, especially at night. But that is precisely why students are not permitted to wander after hours. 10 points from Gryffindor, and straight back to your dormitory. Yes, Professor. Harry nodded, relief washing over him. As McGonagall escorted him back toward Gryffindor Tower, he couldn't help glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see the dark figure following them. The corridor remained empty, yet the weight of Death's words lingered. Master of Death. The title echoed in his mind, impossible yet insistent. What did it mean? And more importantly, what was he supposed to do about it? When Harry awoke the next morning, pale winter sunlight streaming through the dormitory windows, he almost convinced himself that his encounter with Death had been a particularly vivid dream. The memory held the surreal quality of nightmares, too strange to be real, yet too detailed to be entirely fabricated. But when he reached for the invisibility cloak at the bottom of his trunk, a jolt of that same ancient energy coursed through his fingers. No, it hadn't been a dream. You look like you've seen a ghost, Ron commented through a mouthful of toast at breakfast. The great hall was nearly empty, with most students still away for the holidays. Just tired, Harry replied, pushing his scrambled eggs around his plate. Didn't sleep well. Ron nodded sympathetically. Too much excitement with the cloak, I reckon. Did you go exploring after I fell asleep? Harry hesitated, then nodded. Found a weird mirror that shows your family. Dumbledore caught me looking at it. Dumbledore? Were you in trouble? No, he was, understanding. Harry frowned, remembering the headmaster's words about the mirror of Erist. He'd warned Harry about being consumed by dreams of what could never be. Would he have similar warnings about becoming the master of death? Want to play chess after breakfast? Ron asked, oblivious to Harry's inner turmoil. I've been teaching the pieces to trust you, so they might not argue as much this time. Harry forced a smile. Sure, sounds good. The day passed in a blur of wizard chess, which Ron won handily, exploring the castle's corridors, with no sign of death, and trying to focus on homework for when term resumed. By evening, Harry had almost managed to push the strange encounter from his mind, until an owl tapped at the common room window during dinner. Ron, who had gone to fetch more pumpkin juice, didn't notice Harry opening the window. The owl, an ordinary barn owl from the school owlery, dropped a small, folded piece of parchment into his hands and immediately flew off again. Harry unfolded the note, his fingers trembling slightly. The handwriting was the same narrow, loopy script as the note that had accompanied the invisibility cloak. Harry, please come to my office after dinner. The password is, acid pops. Professor Dumbledore, what's that? Ron asked, returning with 2 goblets. Harry pocketed the note. Just homework I forgot about. Listen, I have to go see McGonagall about something after dinner. I'll meet you back in the common room later. The lie came easily, though guilt twisted in his stomach. But how could he explain to Ron that the headmaster wanted to see him, possibly about his encounter with death itself? Some secrets were too heavy to share, even with a best friend. After dinner, Harry made his way to the gargoyle that guarded the entrance to Dumbledore's office. Acid pops, he said, and the gargoyle sprang aside, revealing a moving spiral staircase. Heart pounding, Harry stepped onto it and allowed himself to be carried upward. The door to Dumbledore's office stood ajar. Harry knocked tentatively and heard the headmaster's calm voice, "Enter, Harry." Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his half-moon spectacles perched on his crooked nose, his long silver beard gleaming in the light from dozens of candles. The office was circular, filled with curious silver instruments that emitted puffs of smoke and soft whirring sounds. Portraits of past headmasters and headmistresses dozed in their frames, and on a golden perch behind the door sat a magnificent scarlet and gold bird the size of a swan. "Good evening, Professor," Harry said nervously, approaching the desk. "Good evening, Harry. Please, sit down." Dumbledore gestured to a chair opposite him. "I hope you've had a pleasant Boxing Day. I must say, the kitchen elves outdid themselves with the turkey this year." "Yes, sir. It was delicious." Harry perched on the edge of the chair, waiting for the real reason behind the summons. Dumbledore's piercing blue eyes studied him for a long moment. "Harry, I couldn't help but notice something rather curious last night, when we parted ways outside the mirror of Erist." Harry's mouth went dry. "Curious, sir." "Indeed. After you continued toward Gryffindor Tower, I lingered for a moment. The corridors of Hogwarts have a certain quality to them at night. A peacefulness that I find quite restful." Dumbledore steepled his long fingers. "However, that peace was disturbed by a most unusual presence. A presence I have felt only a handful of times in my long life." Harry swallowed hard. "Was it death, sir?" Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of his surprise. "Ah. So you encountered it as well." "I had wondered." They spoke to me," Harry admitted, relief flooding through him at being able to share this burden. "Said something about me being the master of death because I have one of 3 Hallows, the invisibility cloak." Harry pulled the cloak from his bag. "Is this really Death's cloak, Professor?" Dumbledore sighed deeply, suddenly looking much older. "Yes, Harry, I believe it is. The cloak your father left in my possession is indeed one of the 3 Deathly Hallows, legendary objects said to have been given by death itself to the 3 Peverell brothers." The entity mentioned 3 brothers, Harry said, leaning forward. "So it's true." Death is real. And these Hallows? As to whether death, as an entity, truly exists, that is a question philosophers and theologians have debated for millennia. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled briefly. But something exists, certainly. Something ancient and powerful enough to manifest in our world under certain circumstances. It said I was the master of death. Or that I will be. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, his expression grave. There is a legend, Harry, about the one who unites all three Hallows, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Cloak of Invisibility. It is said that such a person would become the master of death. But I only have the cloak. Indeed. And while the legend speaks of physically possessing the Hallows, I wonder. Dumbledore trailed off, lost in thought. You have already done what no other wizard has done, Harry. You survived the killing curse, you defied death itself. A chill ran down Harry's spine. Professor, does this have something to do with how I survived when Voldemort tried to kill me? I believe it might, though perhaps not in the way you imagine. Dumbledore rose from his chair and began to pace, his purple robe swishing across the stone floor. Your mother's sacrifice created a protection of the most ancient and powerful kind, love. Such magic transcends our understanding, even mine. Death mentioned that too. Said it couldn't penetrate the protection. Fascinating. Dumbledore stopped pacing and looked at Harry with renewed intensity. Did death say anything else to you, Harry? Anything about what being its master might entail? Harry tried to recall the exact words. Not really. It said the other Hallows would find their way to me eventually. That being the master of death wasn't a burden but a gift. He hesitated, then added, Professor, I don't want this. I don't want to be the master of death. I just want to be, normal. Dumbledore's smile was sad but understanding. Few who are truly special ever wish to be, Harry. But we cannot choose our destiny, we can only choose how we face it. So what should I do? What if death comes back? I believe it will, Dumbledore said quietly. And when it does, I would ask that you come to me immediately. This is magic of the most profound and dangerous kind, Harry. Not dark, necessarily, but certainly beyond the scope of ordinary wizardry. Harry nodded, feeling a weight settle on his shoulders, a responsibility he had never asked for. I will, Professor. Good. Dumbledore returned to his seat. Now, I believe it would be prudent to keep this matter between us for the time being. Not out of secrecy, but out of caution. There are those who have spent lifetimes searching for the Deathly Hallows, driven mad by the prospect of mastering death. You mean Voldemort? Him, certainly. But others as well. A shadow passed across Dumbledore's face, so quickly that Harry almost missed it. The lure of conquering death has seduced many wizards greater than you or I. Harry thought of the mirror of Eriste, of seeing his dead parents smiling at him. I don't want to conquer death, Professor. I just want to understand why it chose me. A wise perspective, Harry. One that suggests you may indeed be worthy of such a title, whether you seek it or not. The conversation continued for a while longer, Dumbledore sharing what little he knew of the Deathly Hallows, 3 objects created or gifted by death, passed down through wizarding history, often leaving destruction in their wake. The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand ever created. The Resurrection Stone, capable of recalling loved ones from death's embrace. And the Cloak of Invisibility, which Harry now possessed, the only Hallow that seemed designed to hide from death rather than challenge it. As Harry prepared to leave, Dumbledore offered one final piece of advice. The cloak, Harry, use it well, as the note suggested. But remember that true invisibility comes not just from being unseen, but from understanding when to reveal oneself. Harry nodded, tucking the cloak safely into his bag. Thank you, Professor. Good night. Good night, Harry. And remember, my door is always open to you. As Harry descended the spiral staircase, he couldn't shake the feeling that Dumbledore had been holding something back, some deeper knowledge or concern about Harry's new designation. But the headmaster's reassurance had calmed him somewhat. Whatever this, Master of Death, business meant, he wouldn't have to face it alone. The remainder of the Christmas holidays passed without further visitations from Death. Harry kept the invisibility cloak close at all times, sometimes sitting alone in the dormitory, running his fingers across the fluid material, searching for some sign of its extraordinary origins. But it remained simply a remarkable magical object, extraordinary among wizarding artifacts, perhaps, but showing no outward indication of its connection to Death itself. When the rest of the students returned to Hogwarts and term resumed, Harry found himself relieved by the distraction of classes and homework. He hadn't told Ron or Hermione about his encounter with Death or his conversation with Dumbledore. How could he explain something he barely understood himself? Besides, they had more immediate concerns. Hermione had returned from the holidays more determined than ever to discover the identity of Nicholas Flamel, convinced he was the key to understanding what the three-headed dog was guarding. Ron was preoccupied with the upcoming Quidditch match against Hufflepuff, where Harry would face his second game as Gryffindor Seeker. During one particularly frigid afternoon in mid-January, the trio huddled in the library, ostensibly researching Flamel but mostly trying to stay warm near one of the library's small braziers. Harry's mind kept wandering back to the cloak, safely stored in his trunk upstairs. "Harry, are you even listening?" Hermione's exasperated voice pulled him back to the present. "Sorry," he mumbled, "just thinking about the Hufflepuff match." "Well, as I was saying," Hermione continued, lowering her voice to avoid Madame Pance's attention, "I've been through every section of the library, and there's no mention of Flamel anywhere obvious. He must be in a restricted book. Or maybe he's not important at all," Ron suggested, earning a glare from Hermione. "What? We've been searching for ages with nothing to show for it." "He's important," Harry said with sudden conviction. "Whatever's being guarded in that corridor, Snape wants it. And if Snape wants it, we need to know what it is." Hermione nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Now, I was thinking," but what Hermione was thinking, Harry didn't get to hear. At that moment, a bone-deep chill swept through the library, causing the flames in the brazier to sputter and dim. The air grew thick, heavy with that now familiar ancient presence. "Do you feel that?" Harry whispered, sitting upright. Ron frowned. "Feel what?" "It's cold, but it's been cold all day." "No, not the cold. That presence." Harry looked around frantically, but the library appeared normal, students huddled over books, Madame Pants organizing shelves, dust motes dancing in the weak winter sunlight streaming through high windows. Hermione studied his face with concern. "Harry, what are you talking about? Are you feeling all right?" Harry began, but stopped as he spotted a figure standing between two distant bookshelves. Tall, robed in black, face obscured by a deep hood. No one else seemed to notice it. Death had returned. "I need some air," Harry said abruptly, gathering his books. "I'll meet you back in the common room later." "But we've barely started," Hermione protested. "Let him go," Ron said, noticing Harry's pallor. "He probably needs to think about Quidditch strategies or something." Harry gave Ron a grateful nod and hurried from the library, feeling Death's invisible gaze following him. Once in the corridor, he paused, unsure where to go. Dumbledore had told him to come immediately if Death appeared again, but what if the entity followed him to the headmaster's office? What if it had something private to share? Decision made, Harry headed for an unused classroom nearby. Slipping inside, he closed the door and turned to find Death already waiting for him, still as a statue in the center of the room. "You're back," Harry said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I never truly left." Death's voice filled the room, deep and resonant. "I am always present, Harry Potter. Most simply lack the ability to perceive me." Harry set his bag down on a dusty desk. "Why can I see you, then? Is it because of the cloak?" "Partly. The Hallow attunes its owner to my presence." Death moved closer, its robes seeming to absorb the dim light. But you, child, would likely have developed the sight regardless. You have been touched by me in ways few mortals experience. When Voldemort tried to kill me, you mean? Yes. The night you survived what none should survive, our fates became intertwined. Harry took a deep breath. Professor Dumbledore told me about the Deathly Hallows. He said they're from a legend, that the one who unites them becomes the Master of Death. But I only have the cloak. Albus Dumbledore knows much, but not all. Death's voice carried a hint of something like amusement. The Hallows are real, as you now know. But mastery over me is not gained merely by possessing objects. Then how? By understanding death itself. By accepting its inevitability while recognizing its place in the natural order. Death raised a skeletal hand, and the air between them shimmered. An image appeared, a familiar face with red eyes and slitted nostrils. Voldemort. He seeks to conquer me, to evade me eternally. Such is not mastery but delusion. Harry shuddered at the image before it dissolved. So what does it mean for me to be your master? What am I supposed to do? For now. Nothing. You are young yet, with much to learn. Death moved around the classroom, examining dusty specimens in jars with curious detachment. But soon, you will begin to notice changes. Enhanced perceptions. Awareness of the thinness of the veil between worlds. Perhaps. Glimpses of those who have passed beyond. Harry's heart leapt. You mean I'll be able to see my parents? Death turned to him, the darkness within its hood deepening. Not as you imagine. The dead cannot truly return, Harry Potter. Even the resurrection stone, which grants the closest approximation, brings back mere shadows of what once was. Harry's hope deflated. Then what's the point of being the master of death if you can't bring people back? The point is not to undo what has been done, but to understand the natural cycle of all things. Life. Death. Rebirth. Death's voice grew gentler. Your parents have found peace beyond the veil. To disturb that peace would serve only your desires, not theirs. Tears pricked at Harry's eyes. But I never even knew them. And that is a profound tragedy. One of many that life inflicts upon the living. Death approached Harry, stopping just short of touching him. But consider this, would your parents want you to spend your life yearning for what cannot be, or embracing what is and what might be? The question hung in the air between them. Harry thought of the mirror of Erist, of Dumbledore's warning not to waste away before it, dreaming of the impossible. I think, they'd want me to live, he said finally, the realization both painful and freeing. Precisely. And therein lies the first step toward true mastery. Death seemed pleased, though its featureless face revealed nothing. The master of death does not fear the end, nor do they obsessively evade it. They accept it as part of the journey, while cherishing each moment of life. A commotion in the corridor outside, students changing classes, broke the intensity of the moment. Harry glanced toward the door, then back at Death. I should go. My friends will wonder where I am. Indeed. Cherish them, Harry Potter. Connections to the living are as vital as understanding the dead. Death began to fade, becoming translucent. We shall speak again soon. The one who hides behind two faces seeks what is hidden in this castle. Be wary of him. Wait, what do you mean? Who hides behind two faces? Harry asked frantically, but Death had already vanished, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. Harry stood alone in the empty classroom, mind racing with new questions. The one who hides behind two faces. It sounded like a riddle or a warning. And what was hidden in the castle that someone sought? The item guarded by the three-headed dog. As Harry gathered his bag and prepared to return to his friends, he couldn't shake the feeling that Death's warning was connected to the mystery of Nicholas Flamel and the third-floor corridor. More than ever, they needed to discover what was being guarded and why. The revelation about Nicholas Flamel came unexpectedly, from a chocolate frog card of all places. Dumbledore's card mentioned his work with Flamel on alchemy, which led Hermione to a massive tome she'd checked out for light reading. Nicholas Flamel, they discovered, was the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance that could transform any metal into pure gold and produce the elixir of life, which made the drinker immortal. Immortal! Hermione had exclaimed. No wonder Snape's after it. Anyone would want it. The piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Harry immediately. If the Philosopher's Stone granted immortality, it would be the ultimate tool for someone seeking to evade death indefinitely. Voldemort, who death had shown him, who had murdered his parents and tried to murder him as a baby, wouldn't he desire such a stone? But Harry kept these thoughts to himself, instead agreeing with his friends that Snape must be after the stone for its power and wealth. The warning about the one who hides behind two faces remained a mystery. Did it refer to someone two-faced in the sense of being deceitful? Or was it more literal? These questions plagued Harry as January melted into February. Death did not appear again, though occasionally Harry felt that distinctive chill, that sense of being observed by ancient eyes. He hadn't told Dumbledore about the second visit, partly because the headmaster had been absent from the castle frequently, and partly because Harry wasn't sure what to report. The warning had been cryptic at best. The Quidditch match against Hufflepuff brought a new challenge when Harry learned that Snape would be refereeing. Convinced the potion's master meant to harm Harry as he apparently had during the previous match, Ron and Hermione urged him to feign illness and withdraw. I can't, Harry told them firmly. There isn't a reserve seeker. If I back out, Gryffindor can't play at all. The match itself proved unexpectedly brief. With Snape awarding penalties to Hufflepuff for increasingly dubious reasons, Harry knew he needed to end the game quickly. Spotting the snitch hovering near Snape himself, Harry dived, a steep, reckless plunge that had the crowd gasping. Snape turned just in time to see Harry streak past him, missing the professor by inches, and pulling out of the dive with the snitch clutched triumphantly in his hand. The stands erupted. The game had lasted barely 5 minutes, possibly the shortest match in Hogwarts history. As his teammates mobbed him, Harry caught sight of a familiar figure at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, not Death this time, but Snape, hurrying into the trees with furtive determination. Curious, Harry followed on his broomstick, hovering silently above the forest canopy until he spotted Snape meeting with another figure in a small clearing, Professor Quirrell, the stuttering defense against the dark arts teacher. Don't know why UW wanted TT to meet here of all places, Severus, Quirrell was stammering. Oh, I thought we'd keep this private, said Snape, his voice icy. Students aren't supposed to know about the Philosopher's Stone, after all. Harry leaned forward on his broomstick, straining to hear as Snape pressed Quirrell about his protections for the stone and whether he'd figured out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's. The conversation confirmed their suspicions. Snape was trying to steal the stone, but also revealed that other teachers had set protections as well, and that Quirrell's contribution was apparently the final barrier. When Harry reported this to Ron and Hermione back at the castle, they were alarmed but not surprised. So we were right, it is the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione said. And Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him steal it. And once he's got it, he'll use it to bring back you-know-who. Ron added, face pale beneath his freckles. Harry nodded grimly. That's what it looks like. But even as he agreed with his friends, a niggling doubt persisted. Death had warned about someone hiding behind two faces. If that meant someone deceitful, Snape certainly fit the bill. But something about the warning suggested a more literal interpretation. Two actual faces. The thought was interrupted by the arrival of Neville Longbottom, hopping into the common room with his legs stuck together, the victim of Malfoy's leglocker curse. As Hermione performed the counter-curse, Harry handed Neville a chocolate frog from his pocket. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Harry told him firmly. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinking Slytherin. Neville's weak smile of gratitude triggered an unexpected realization for Harry. The Sorting Hat had considered placing him in Slytherin as well, yet he'd ended up in Gryffindor because he'd asked not to be in Slytherin. Choices, it seemed, could override destiny, or at least redirect it. Could the same be true of his designation as the Master of Death? Could he choose a different path? That night, Harry lay awake long after his dorm mates had fallen asleep, contemplating Death's words. The Master of Death accepted Death's inevitability while recognizing its place in the natural order. The Philosopher's Stone, with its promise of immortality, represented the opposite approach, a denial of Death's rightful place. If Voldemort sought the stone to return and become immortal, he would be directly opposing the natural order that Death upheld. Harry, as Death's chosen master, should logically stand against such an attempt. But what could an 11-year-old wizard, barely halfway through his first year at Hogwarts, do against the darkest wizard of the age? Harry slipped out of bed and retrieved the invisibility cloak from his trunk. Its silvery material seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight streaming through the dormitory windows. He wrapped it around his shoulders, feeling that now familiar ancient energy flowing through him. "Are you there?" he whispered into the darkness. "Can we talk?" For several minutes, nothing happened. Harry stood alone in the silent dormitory, feeling foolish. Then, gradually, the temperature dropped. Frost crystallized on the windowpanes, and Harry's breath formed visible clouds in the suddenly frigid air. "I am always near, Harry Potter." Death stood before him, materializing between one blink and the next. Tonight, the entity seemed less substantial, more a collection of shadows given form than a solid presence. "I need to ask you something," Harry said, voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking his friends. "About the Philosopher's Stone." Death's hood inclined slightly. "Ah. You have discovered what is hidden in the castle." "Yes. It can make someone immortal, can't it?" "That goes against the natural order you talked about." "Indeed. The stone is an aberration, a clever one, created through impressive alchemy, but an aberration nonetheless." Death's voice carried a note of distaste. "Those who extend their lives through the elixir do not truly escape me. They merely postpone our meeting." "Is Voldemort trying to get it? Is he the one who hides behind two faces?" Death was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was softer, almost cautious. "Look closely at those around you, Harry Potter. Not all is as it appears. The Dark Lord exists in a state neither living nor dead, a fragment clinging to this world through terrible means. But you said he'd want the stone. And so he does." Desperately. Harry's mind raced, trying to connect the pieces. If Snape is trying to steal the stone, is he working for Voldemort? Again, that unsettling silence. "I cannot direct your actions or reveal all that I see. Such knowledge must be earned. But consider this, why would one who already stands in the light need to hide his face?" The cryptic response only confused Harry further. "I don't understand. Are you saying Snape isn't the one after the stone?" "I am saying that appearances deceive, and those who seem weak may harbor great darkness." Death began to fade, its form becoming increasingly transparent. "Be vigilant, Master of Death. The enemy approaches not with a roar but with a whisper." "Wait!" Harry called, but Death had vanished, leaving only the lingering chill and frost-covered windows as evidence of its visit. Harry stood motionless, processing the entity's words. If not Snape, then who was after the stone? Who at Hogwarts might be harboring Voldemort, helping him return to power? The obvious answer made his blood run cold: Quirrell. The stammering, seemingly harmless defense professor with his ridiculous turban and fear of his own shadow. Could he be the one hiding behind two faces? Could the turban be concealing more than just an embarrassing incident with a zombie, as Quirrell had claimed? It seemed absurd, yet the more Harry considered it, the more pieces fell into place. Quirrell had been at Hogwarts since the beginning of the year, when the stone was moved from Gringotts. He had the perfect excuse to be near the third-floor corridor as a professor. And everyone, including Snape, underestimated him because of his apparent weakness. Harry needed to tell someone, Dumbledore ideally, but the headmaster was away at the Ministry of Magic. McGonagall. She might dismiss his suspicions without proof. No, he needed to discuss this with Ron and Hermione first, to see if his theory made sense. But how could he explain his sudden reversal without revealing his conversations with Death? His friends already thought he was under enough pressure with Quidditch and classes, he couldn't burden them with the knowledge that he was supposedly becoming the Master of Death. Sighing, Harry removed the invisibility cloak and returned it to his trunk. Tomorrow, he would find a way to subtly test his theory, to observe Quirrell more closely. For now, he needed sleep, though he doubted it would come easily with the weight of these revelations pressing on his mind. The next morning at breakfast, Harry studied Professor Quirrell from across the Great Hall. The defense teacher sat nervously at the staff table, twitching occasionally and barely touching his food. His purple turban, slightly askew as always, suddenly seemed less ridiculous and more suspicious to Harry. What might it be hiding? "You're staring," Hermione whispered, nudging Harry with her elbow. "What's wrong?" Harry tore his gaze away from Quirrell. "Nothing. Just thinking about the stone." "Still worried about Snape trying to steal it?" Ron asked around a mouthful of sausage. "I'm not sure it's Snape anymore," Harry said carefully, testing the waters. "What if it's someone else? Someone we wouldn't suspect?" Hermione's eyebrows rose. "Like who? Filch? What about Quirrell?" Harry suggested, trying to sound casual. "He has access to the corridor too." Ron snorted. "Quirrell? He's afraid of his own shadow. Besides, remember how Snape was threatening him in the forest? Trying to get his protection secret? Maybe that's what he wants us to think," Harry persisted. "Maybe the stuttering is an act." Hermione gave him a concerned look. "Harry, that's quite a stretch. What makes you suddenly suspect Quirrell?" Harry hesitated. He couldn't tell them about Death's cryptic warning. "Just a feeling. Something about him seems off." "Well, he is odd," Ron acknowledged, "but I still think Snape's our villain. He's got that whole evil bat thing going on." "Maybe," Harry conceded, realizing he wouldn't convince them without evidence. "Forget I said anything." But throughout the day, Harry couldn't forget. During defense against the dark arts, he paid closer attention to Quirrell than ever before. The professor stuttered through a lesson on repelling minor dark creatures, his nervous demeanor seemingly genuine. Yet occasionally, when he thought no one was watching, a different expression would cross his face, something harder, more calculating. And the turban. Harry couldn't stop staring at it, wondering what secrets it concealed. Once, Quirrell turned suddenly, catching Harry's intense gaze. For a split second, something like alarm, or was it rage, flashed in the professor's eyes before his usual fearful expression reasserted itself. After class, Harry lingered, pretending to gather his books slowly. "Anything I see can help you with, P.P. Potter?" Quirrell asked, adjusting his turban nervously. "Just wondering about something, Professor," Harry said, heart racing. "In our reading, it mentioned that some dark wizards can possess others. Is that true?" Quirrell's face went very still. "Possession is extremely rare and dangerous, Potter. Not as something first years need worry about. But it is possible." Harry pressed. "For a really powerful dark wizard? I suggest you stick to the C curriculum, Potter." Quirrell's voice had hardened almost imperceptibly. "Some knowledge is not for the young." "Sorry, Professor. Just curious." Harry shouldered his bag and headed for the door. "Potter." Harry turned back. Quirrell was staring at him with an intensity that seemed entirely at odds with his usual demeanor. "See, curiosity can be dangerous. Be best remember that." The words carried a threat that sent a chill down Harry's spine. He nodded and hurried from the classroom, certain now that his suspicions were correct. That hadn't been the response of a frightened, incompetent teacher, it had been a warning. As Harry rushed to his next class, the corridor ahead of him suddenly darkened, as though a shadow had passed over the sun. The air grew cold, and a now familiar presence made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Death materialized before him, blocking his path. Unlike previous appearances, the entity seemed agitated, its robes rippling though no breeze stirred the air. "You have drawn his attention," Death said without preamble, its voice sharp with urgency. "The fragment senses your awareness." "You mean Voldemort? He's possessing Quirrell, isn't he?" Harry asked, glancing around to ensure they were alone in the corridor. "Yes. The Dark Lord clings to life through his servant, a parasite feeding on another's strength." Death's form seemed to solidify, becoming more substantial than Harry had yet seen it. "He suspects you know." "Because I asked about possession." Harry cursed his directness. "What should I do? Tell Dumbledore?" "The headmaster remains absent from the castle." Death moved closer. "Listen carefully, Harry Potter. The one who cheated me years ago grows desperate. The stone represents his chance to regain physical form, to return fully to the world of the living. And I have to stop him," Harry concluded, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "You must make that choice yourself." Death's voice softened. "But know this, as my chosen master, you possess certain advantages." "What kind of advantages?" Instead of answering directly, Death reached out a skeletal hand. "Take what is offered, Harry Potter." Hesitantly, Harry extended his own hand. Death's bony fingers brushed against his palm, cold as ice yet somehow not unpleasant. A tingling sensation spread up Harry's arm, followed by a wave of energy that coursed through his entire body. "What did you do to me?" Harry gasped, pulling his hand back. "I have awakened what already lay dormant within you." Death's hood inclined slightly. "The first gift of mastery, perception beyond the veil." Before Harry could ask what that meant, footsteps echoed from around the corner. Death vanished instantly, leaving Harry alone in the corridor as a group of third-year Hufflepuffs rounded the bend. Harry hurried away, his mind racing and his hand still tingling where Death had touched it. Perception beyond the veil. What did that even mean? He got his answer that evening in the Great Hall. As Harry picked at his dinner, half listening to Ron and Hermione debate the properties of the Philosopher's Stone, he glanced up at the staff table. Quirrell sat in his usual place, nervously sipping from a goblet. But now, impossibly, Harry saw something else, a faint, misty aura surrounding the defense professor, darkest around his turban. And within that darkness, a face, snake-like, with glowing red eyes, seemed to stare directly at Harry. Harry dropped his fork with a clatter, earning concerned looks from his friends. "Harry? What's wrong?" Hermione asked. "Nothing," he managed, tearing his gaze away from the horrifying vision. "Thought I saw a spider in my food." Ron immediately pushed his own plate away, but Hermione looked skeptical. "Since when are you afraid of spiders?" "That's Ron's phobia." "Must be contagious," Harry joked weakly, forcing himself to look normal while his mind reeled. He could see it, the piece of Voldemort attached to Quirrell, hiding beneath the turban just as he'd suspected. Death had given him the ability to perceive what others couldn't, to see beyond normal human limits. The revelation was both terrifying and exhilarating. But what was he supposed to do with this knowledge? Dumbledore was still away. McGonagall or the other professors might not believe him without proof. And now that he could see Voldemort's presence, the Dark Wizard might sense Harry's awareness even more acutely. Harry needed a plan, and he needed it quickly. The opportunity to share his discoveries with Ron and Hermione came sooner than expected. That evening in the common room, as they worked on a particularly nasty potions essay, Neville stumbled through the portrait hole, his legs locked together again. "Malfoy," he explained miserably as Hermione performed the counter-curse. "I ran into him outside the library. He said he'd been looking for someone to practice that on." Go to Professor McGonagall. Hermione urged. Report him. Neville shook his head. I don't want more trouble. You've got to stand up to him, Neville, said Ron. He's used to walking all over people, but that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. There's no need to tell me I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor, Malfoy's already done that, Neville choked out. Harry felt in his pocket and pulled out a chocolate frog. He handed it to Neville, who looked as though he might cry. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Harry said. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinking Slytherin. As Neville's lips twitched in a weak smile, Harry was struck by a sudden realization. The Sorting Hat had considered putting him in Slytherin too, but he'd chosen differently. Choices, it seemed, could override destiny, or at least redirect it. Maybe the same could be true of his designation as the Master of Death. Maybe he could choose what that meant. After Neville departed for the dormitory, Harry seized his opportunity. Listen, he said to Ron and Hermione, lowering his voice. I need to tell you something important, but you have to promise to keep it between us. His serious tone caught their attention immediately. Hermione closed her books, and Ron set aside his half-written essay. What is it? Hermione asked, leaning forward. Harry took a deep breath. I think I know who's trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone. It's not Snape, it's Quirrell. Ron's jaw dropped. Quirrell. You're mental. Let me explain, Harry continued quickly. I think Voldemort is possessing him. Hiding under that turban. The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the crackling of the common room fire. Hermione recovered first. Harry, that's an extraordinary claim. What evidence do you have? Harry hesitated. How much could he share without revealing his encounters with death? I've been watching him. Haven't you noticed how his stutter sometimes disappears when he thinks no one's paying attention? And the way he keeps adjusting that turban? That's hardly proof of you-know-who possessing him, Ron pointed out, though he looked unnerved by the suggestion. I know it sounds crazy, but Harry faltered, then decided to take a risk. I can see it. There's something dark attached to him, centered on the turban. I can't explain how I know, but I'm certain Voldemort is there. Hermione studied his face with concern. Harry, have you been sleeping properly? These nightmares about you-know-who, it's not nightmares, Harry insisted. Look, remember when I went after Snape during the Quidditch match and overheard him threatening Quirrell? What if it wasn't what we thought? What if Snape suspects Quirrell and was trying to figure out if he'd gotten past the other protections? This gave his friends pause. Ron frowned thoughtfully. Snape is awful, but even McGonagall trusts him. Dumbledore too. But why would Quirrell pretend to be so pathetic? Hermione asked. Perfect cover, isn't it? Harry pointed out. No one would suspect him. Everyone's too busy watching Snape. Slowly, Harry could see doubt creeping into his friends' expressions. They weren't convinced, but they were considering the possibility. If, and this is a big if, you-know-who is possessing Quirrell, we need to tell Dumbledore immediately, Hermione said firmly. He's not here, Harry replied. I already checked. He's at the Ministry and won't be back until tomorrow at the earliest. McGonagall, then, Hermione suggested. Harry shook his head. Without proof, she'll think we're making it up. We need evidence. What kind of evidence? Ron asked skeptically. It's not like we can just pull off his turban and check. No, but we can watch him more closely, Harry said, a plan forming in his mind. The invisibility cloak, we can use it to follow him, see where he goes, what he does when he thinks no one's watching. Hermione bit her lip. That's risky, Harry. If he really is working for you-know-who. We'll be careful, Harry promised. Just reconnaissance, nothing more. If we see anything suspicious, we go straight to a teacher. After further discussion and reluctant agreement from his friends, Harry retrieved the invisibility cloak from his trunk. The trio huddled beneath it, stepping awkwardly through the portrait hole and into the deserted corridor beyond. It was nearly curfew. Quirrell would likely be heading to his quarters soon. They found the defense professor leaving the staff room, walking briskly through the darkened corridors with none of his usual nervous mannerisms. Following at a safe distance, they watched as he headed not toward the teacher's quarters, but up the stairs toward the third-floor corridor, the forbidden corridor. "See?" Harry whispered triumphantly. "He's going after the stone." But Quirrell stopped before reaching the forbidden door. Instead, he ducked into an empty classroom, closing the door firmly behind him. The trio crept closer, positioning themselves outside the door. "Master, I cannot yet breach the final chamber," Quirrell's voice came through the door, but without its usual stutter. "The mirror resists my efforts. I need more time." Another voice responded, high, cold, and unmistakably inhuman. "Time is a luxury we do not possess, Quirrell. The boy suspects. I have felt his gaze upon us." Hermione gasped, quickly covering her mouth with her hand. Ron had gone pale beneath his freckles. Harry felt a grim satisfaction. His friends now had the proof they needed. "What would you have me do, Master?" Quirrell asked, his tone subservient. "Accelerate our plans," the cold voice commanded. "The old fool remains absent from the castle. Tonight, we make our attempt. But Severus watches the corridor closely, then create a diversion. Something to draw the teachers away." There was silence for a moment, then Quirrell spoke again, a note of cruel satisfaction in his voice. "Perhaps a troll, Master. It worked effectively at Halloween." Yes, that would serve. See to it, Quirrell. I will not tolerate further delay." The conversation seemed to be concluding. Harry tugged on his friend's sleeves, pulling them away from the door and down the corridor before Quirrell could emerge and discover them. Once safely around a corner, they huddled closer beneath the cloak. That was him, wasn't it?" Ron whispered, his voice trembling. "You know who?" Harry nodded grimly. "Now do you believe me?" "We need to find McGonagall right away," Hermione insisted, her face ashen. "This is far beyond us, Harry." "You're right," Harry agreed. "Let's go." But as they turned to head toward McGonagall's office, a bone-deep chill swept through the corridor. The torches dimmed, and that familiar ancient presence materialized before them, death, visible now not only to Harry but seemingly to Ron and Hermione as well, judging by their strangled cries of shock. "Death," Harry acknowledged, stepping forward from beneath the cloak. "They can see you." "I have made myself visible to your companions," Death confirmed, its voice echoing through the corridor. "The situation has escalated. The fragment moves toward the stone tonight." Ron made a choking sound. "Harry, what? Who?" "It's Death," Harry explained quickly, like, actual death. "It's been visiting me since Christmas, when I got the invisibility cloak. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Hermione squeaked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Harry, that's Death." "Indeed," Death agreed, seeming almost amused. "And your friend is my chosen master." "Master of Death?" Ron's voice had risen several octaves. "Harry, what did you do?" "Nothing. It just happened." Harry turned back to Death. "We're going to Professor McGonagall. She can stop Quirrell." Death's hood shook slightly. "The fragment has planned for this. The diversion he prepares will draw all teachers away from the stone's protections. By the time order is restored, he will have breached the final chamber." "Then what do we do?" Harry asked desperately. "You must make that choice yourself, Master of Death." Death's voice was solemn. "But know that the stone represents an abomination against the natural order. Its destruction would please me greatly. So I need to get to it first. Destroy it before Voldemort can use it. Harry, no. Hermione protested. This is too dangerous. We're first years. And I'm apparently the master of death, Harry countered, a new determination filling him. Whatever that means, it has to count for something, right? Death inclined its hood. You possess certain advantages, Harry Potter. The perception I have granted you is but one. Your proximity to me has made you more resistant to magical harm, particularly dark magic. See? Harry turned to his friends. I have an edge Voldemort doesn't expect. Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances, but Harry could see the resolution forming in their expressions. We're with you, Ron said finally. But blimey, mate, you don't half attract trouble. He has never been alone, Death observed. That is his greatest strength, and one the Dark Lord has never understood. With that cryptic comment, Death began to fade. I cannot directly intervene, Master of Death. This challenge is yours to face. But know that I am never far. The entity's form dissolved, leaving only a lingering chill in the corridor. Silence fell among the trio, broken finally by Hermione's shaky exhale. Harry James Potter, she said faintly, you have a lot of explaining to do. But I suppose it will have to wait. Harry nodded gratefully. We need a plan. Quirrell's going to create a diversion, then go after the stone. We need to get there first. As the trio huddled in the corridor, formulating their strategy, Harry felt an unexpected surge of confidence. He was 11 years old, barely halfway through his first year at Hogwarts, facing the darkest wizard of the age, but he wasn't alone. He had his friends. And, it seemed, he had death itself as an ally. The path ahead would be dangerous, but Harry Potter, the boy who lived and now the master of death, was ready to face whatever came. The diversion came shortly after midnight, a troll, just as Quirrell had planned, but not in the dungeons this time. It had somehow been released near the astronomy tower, causing panic among the few students having their midnight lessons there. As predicted, the teachers rushed to contain the situation, leaving the third-floor corridor temporarily unguarded. Harry, Ron, and Hermione waited beneath the invisibility cloak near the forbidden door, watching as Quirrell slipped inside once the coast was clear. They gave him a few minutes head start, enough time to deal with Fluffy, the three-headed dog, but not enough to get too far ahead. Remember the plan, Harry whispered as they prepared to enter. We follow Quirrell through the challenges, but we don't confront him until the end. We're just trying to get to the stone first. His friends nodded, determination etched on their faces despite their obvious fear. Taking a deep breath, Harry pushed open the door. Fluffy was already unconscious, a small harp playing itself in the corner, Quirrell's work. The trapdoor stood open, revealing the dark passage below. Without hesitation, Harry led the way, jumping into the darkness with Ron and Hermione following closely behind. They landed on something soft but alarmingly mobile, Devil's Snare, a deadly plant that began to wrap its tendrils around them. Hermione, keeping her head in the crisis, conjured blue flames that drove the plant back, allowing them to escape through to the next chamber. Each subsequent challenge tested their various abilities. Flying keys required Harry's seeker skills to capture the right one. A giant wizard's chess set demanded Ron's strategic mind, though it ended with him sacrificing himself and being knocked unconscious by the White Queen. A logic puzzle with potions needed Hermione's analytical reasoning, but with only enough potion for one person to proceed to the final chamber. You go, Hermione told Harry, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. I'll take Ron back, get help if I can. Harry, be careful. Harry nodded, swallowing hard. I will. And Hermione, thank you. As she left with Ron, Harry drank the potion that would allow him to pass through the flames into the final chamber. The liquid sent ice through his veins, making him shiver as he stepped through the fire unharmed. The last chamber was circular, with steps leading down to a central platform. On it stood a familiar object, the mirror of Eris that Harry had discovered at Christmas. And before the mirror, his back to Harry, stood Professor Quirrell. "I wondered whether I'd be seeing you here, Potter," said Quirrell, turning to face him. His voice was completely different, no stutter, no tremor, just cold confidence. Harry stepped forward cautiously. "I knew it was you." "Yes, you did, didn't you?" Unusually perceptive for a first year. Quirrell's eyes narrowed. "How, I wonder? How did you see through my performance when even Dumbledore was fooled?" Harry remained silent, unsure how much to reveal. With his enhanced perception, he could see the dark aura surrounding Quirrell more clearly than ever, concentrated at the back of his head where Voldemort lurked beneath the turban. "No matter," Quirrell continued when Harry didn't respond. "You're too late. The stone will soon be mine, or rather, my master's." "It won't work," Harry said, edging around the chamber, trying to get closer to the mirror. "Dumbledore will have made sure of that." Quirrell laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. "Dumbledore is in London. By the time he returns, I will have the stone and the Dark Lord will rise again." As Quirrell turned back to the mirror, muttering about seeing himself presenting the stone to his master but not understanding how to get it, another voice spoke, the same high, cold voice they had heard earlier. "Use the boy. Use the boy." Quirrell spun around. "Yes, Potter, come here." Harry approached cautiously, his heart pounding. As he drew level with Quirrell, the professor grabbed his arm and shoved him in front of the mirror. "Look in the mirror and tell me what you see," Quirrell demanded. Harry stared into the glass. At first, he saw only his own reflection, pale and frightened. Then the reflection smiled, reached into its pocket, and pulled out a blood-red stone. It winked and placed the stone back in its pocket, and as it did so, Harry felt something heavy drop into his real pocket. Somehow, incredibly, he had gotten the stone. "Well?" Quirrell said impatiently. "What do you see?" Harry thought quickly. "I see myself shaking hands with Dumbledore," he invented. "I've won the House Cup for Gryffindor." Quirrell cursed and pushed him aside. But as Harry began to edge away, that cold voice spoke again. "He lies. He lies. Potter." Quirrell shouted. "Come back here. Tell me the truth. What did you see? Let me speak to him. Face to face." "Master, you are not strong enough. I have strength enough, for this." Harry stood frozen with horror as Quirrell reached up and began to unwrap his turban. The purple fabric fell away, and Quirrell turned slowly on the spot. Where there should have been the back of his head, there was a face, the most terrible face Harry had ever seen. Chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. "Harry Potter." It whispered. "See what I have become. Mere shadow and vapor. I have form only when I can share another's body, but there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me. These past weeks, you saw faithful Quirrell drinking it for me in the forest, and once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Now, why don't you give me that stone in your pocket?" So he knew. Harry stumbled backward, fear coursing through him. "Don't be a fool," snarled the face. "Better save your own life and join me, or you'll meet the same end as your parents. They died begging me for mercy." "Liar!" Harry shouted suddenly, a surge of anger cutting through his fear. Quirrell was walking backward, so that Voldemort could still see him. The evil face smiled. "How touching!" It hissed. "I always value bravery. Yes, boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first, he put up a courageous fight, but your mother needn't have died, she was trying to protect you. Now give me the stone, unless you want her to have died in vain." "Never," Harry whispered, his hand closing around the stone in his pocket. At that moment, the temperature in the chamber plummeted. Frost spread across the stone floor, crystallizing in intricate patterns. The flames guarding the entrance flickered and dimmed. A shadow passed across the chamber, deeper than darkness. Death materialized between Harry and Quirrell, its towering form imposing in the confined space. "You," Voldemort hissed, genuine fear in his voice for the first time. "It cannot be." "Hello, Tom Riddle," Death said, its voice echoing through the chamber. "We meet again, though not for the last time. Your little fragments keep you tethered, but not forever." "Master, what is this?" Quirrell stammered, his confidence shattered. Voldemort's face contorted with rage and terror. "Kill the boy. Get the stone." Quirrell lunged forward, but Death did not move from Harry's path. Instead, the entity turned to Harry, its voice calm. "He cannot touch you, Master of Death. Your mother's protection flows in your veins, and my favor shields you further. Show him." Understanding flooded Harry. As Quirrell's hands closed around his throat, Harry grabbed the professor's wrist, and Quirrell screamed. Blisters erupted across his skin where Harry had touched him. "Seize him! Seize him!" shrieked Voldemort, and Quirrell lunged again, knocking Harry to the ground, his hands burning but determined to fulfill his master's orders. Harry, acting on instinct, reached up and pressed his hands against Quirrell's face. The professor howled in agony, his skin blistering and cracking beneath Harry's touch. Harry held on, even as pain split his head and darkness threatened to overtake him. Through blurring vision, Harry saw Death watching impassively, its skeletal hand extended toward the struggling pair. The stone in Harry's pocket grew hot, then began to crumble, not from Quirrell's efforts to retrieve it, but from Death's influence. "No!" Voldemort screamed as the stone disintegrated. "What have you done?" "Restored the natural order," Death replied simply. "As is my right. As is my master's choice." Quirrell collapsed, his body turning to dust as Voldemort's parasitic presence abandoned him. A shrieking, formless shadow erupted from the remains, circling the chamber once before passing through Harry's body, bringing a pain so intense that darkness finally claimed him. As consciousness slipped away, Harry heard Death's voice, distant yet clear. "Well done, Harry Potter. You have proven worthy of the title bestowed upon you. Rest now. We shall speak again." Then there was nothing but peaceful blackness. Harry awoke in the hospital wing, the familiar scent of clean sheets and medicinal potions filling his nostrils. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, suggesting he had been unconscious for some time. Turning his head, he saw Dumbledore sitting beside his bed, watching him with a thoughtful expression. "Good afternoon, Harry," said the headmaster. Harry blinked, memories flooding back. "Sir. The stone. Quirrell. Voldemort. Calm yourself, dear boy, or Madame Pomfrey will have me thrown out," Dumbledore said, smiling. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your friends will be relieved to hear you've awakened, they've been extremely worried." "But sir, the stone has been destroyed," Dumbledore finished. "Nicholas and I had a little chat, and we agreed it was for the best." "So Flamel will die?" Harry asked, remembering what they had learned about the stone's creator. "He has enough elixir stored to set his affairs in order, but yes, he will die." Dumbledore smiled at the look of concern on Harry's face. "To one as young as you, I'm sure it seems incredible, but to Nicholas and Perenelle, it really is like going to bed after a very, very long day. After all, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure." Harry considered this, thinking of his conversations with death itself. "I think I understand, sir." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "I believe you might understand better than most, Harry. More than you did before your encounter in the chamber." Harry hesitated, wondering how much Dumbledore knew. "Sir. Did you see, was there someone else in the chamber? Besides Quirrell and Voldemort and me? If you are referring to a certain ancient entity that seems to have taken an interest in you, then yes, I am aware of its presence." Dumbledore's expression grew serious. "Death has visited you several times since Christmas, has it not?" Since you received your father's cloak. Harry nodded slowly. It called me the Master of Death. Said the cloak was one of 3 Hallows. Indeed. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. The Deathly Hallows, 3 objects of immense power, said to have been given by death to 3 brothers long ago. Your invisibility cloak is one such Hallow, passed down through the Peverell line to the Potters. But what does it mean? Being the Master of Death. That, I think, is something you are still discovering. Dumbledore's eyes grew distant. Many have sought the Hallows over the centuries, believing that uniting them would grant control over death itself. But true mastery, I suspect, comes not from conquering death but from accepting it, understanding its place in the natural order. That's what death said too, Harry murmured. That Voldemort was trying to defy the natural order with the stone. And you chose to destroy it, Dumbledore observed. A choice that speaks volumes about your character, Harry. They talked for a while longer, Dumbledore explaining how he had arrived in time to pull Harry from the chamber but after the confrontation had concluded. He admitted to having suspected Quirrell, though not to the extent of him harboring Voldemort himself. When Harry asked about his mother's protection, Dumbledore explained the ancient magic that had saved him, both as a baby and against Quirrell's touch. Finally, as Dumbledore prepared to leave, Harry asked the question that had been nagging at him. Sir, what does it mean for me, going forward? Being the Master of Death. Dumbledore paused, considering his answer carefully. I believe, Harry, that you will find death to be neither friend nor foe, but a companion on your journey. The title bestowed upon you is not one of control but of understanding. Death has chosen you because you, uniquely, have demonstrated both the will to defy it when necessary and the wisdom to accept it when appropriate. So I should just, continue as normal. Dumbledore chuckled. As normal as life ever is for Harry Potter, yes. But perhaps with a deeper appreciation for both life and what follows it. He rose from his chair. Rest now. Your friends will be permitted to visit soon, and I dare say they have many questions for you. After Dumbledore left, Harry lay back against his pillows, processing everything they had discussed. Being the Master of Death seemed less frightening now, more like a responsibility than a burden. Death had chosen him not because he was special, but because of the choices he made, the choice to value life while respecting death's inevitability. Later, when Ron and Hermione were finally allowed to visit, they bombarded him with questions about what had happened after Hermione had left with an unconscious Ron. Dumbledore wouldn't tell us anything, Hermione complained. Just that you were recovering and the stone was safe. It's gone, Harry told them. Destroyed. Death helped me stop Quirrell and Voldemort. Still can't believe you're the actual Master of Death, Ron said, shaking his head in amazement. My best mate. Blimey. What does it mean though, Harry? Hermione asked, ever practical. Will death keep visiting you? Harry nodded slowly. I think so. But it's not bad, actually. It's more like having a very strange, very powerful ally. As his friends digested this, Harry felt a familiar presence in the room, a slight chill, a deepening of shadows in the corner. Death stood silently watching, visible only to Harry. The entity inclined its hood slightly, a gesture almost like approval. Harry smiled faintly in return. Whatever being the Master of Death would mean for his future, he knew he wasn't facing it alone. He had his friends. He had Dumbledore's guidance. And he had death itself, not as an enemy to be feared, but as a teacher, perhaps even a protector in its own way. For an 11-year-old boy who had once lived in a cupboard under the stairs, it was a strange turn of events indeed. But then, Harry Potter had never been destined for an ordinary life. The end of term approached rapidly after that. The story of what had happened in the chambers beneath the third-floor corridor spread throughout the school in various exaggerated versions, none coming close to the truth about Death's involvement. Gryffindor won the House Cup, thanks largely to the points Dumbledore awarded Harry, Ron, and Hermione for their bravery. Exams were passed, trunks were packed, and before Harry knew it, he was boarding the Hogwarts Express for the journey home. As the castle disappeared from view behind a bend, Harry felt a pang of sadness. Despite everything, Voldemort, Quirrell, the stone, becoming the master of death, it had been the best year of his life. "You must come and stay this summer," said Ron. "Both of you." "I'll send an owl." "Thanks," said Harry. "I'll need something to look forward to." The journey passed pleasantly, with Hermione fretting about the exam results they hadn't received yet and Ron planning summer Quidditch games at the Burrow. As they neared London, Harry grew quieter, thinking about the return to Privet Drive. "You'll be all right, Harry," Hermione said softly, noticing his mood. "And it's only for a little while. Before you know it, we'll be back for our second year." Harry nodded, forcing a smile. "I know. It's just, after everything that's happened, going back to the Dursleys seems so normal." Ron suggested. "Mundane," Harry corrected. "Which I suppose I should appreciate, given the alternative." As they pulled into platform 9 3/4, gathering their belongings and preparing to disembark, Harry felt that now familiar chill, a presence that had become almost comforting in its consistency. Death stood on the platform, visible only to Harry, its robed form still amidst the bustle of arriving families. As Harry watched, the entity raised a skeletal hand in what might have been a farewell gesture. Harry smiled faintly. Somehow, he knew Death would never be far away, not lurking, waiting to claim him, but watching over him as he grew into his unexpected title, Harry Potter, the boy who lived and the master of death. What that would mean for his future remained to be seen. But for now, it was enough to know that he had survived his first year at Hogwarts, stopped Voldemort from returning, and made the first true friends of his life. Whatever came next, Harry Potter was ready to face it. Chapter 2, Whispers Beyond the Veil. Summer at Privet Drive was proving to be even more unbearable than Harry remembered. The pristine suburban monotony felt suffocating after a year at Hogwarts, a stark contrast to the ancient castle with its moving staircases and enchanted ceilings. But it wasn't just the absence of magic that made Harry's return so difficult, it was the loneliness. His bedroom window stood open despite the late hour, allowing a gentle breeze to stir the parchment on his makeshift desk. Harry sat cross-legged on his bed, quill in hand, attempting to complete a history of magic essay by wandlight. The Dursleys had locked his school things in the cupboard under the stairs, but thanks to Fred and George Weasley's lock-picking lessons, Harry had managed to retrieve what he needed when Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia were asleep. A soft rustling drew his attention to the window where a magnificent snowy owl perched on the sill, a dead mouse dangling from her beak. "Thanks, Hedwig," Harry whispered, stroking her feathers. "At least one of us is eating well." The Dursleys had been feeding him less than ever, convinced that restricting his meals would somehow suppress his magical abilities. Little did they know that magic wasn't Harry's only extraordinary quality these days. As if summoned by the thought, a familiar chill permeated the bedroom. The temperature dropped noticeably, and Hedwig's feathers puffed up in response. She had grown accustomed to these visitations over the past month but still maintained a respectful distance, retreating to the top of her cage. "You hunger," said a deep, resonant voice that seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves. Harry turned to find Death standing in the corner of his small bedroom, its dark robes absorbing what little light the wand provided. "It's not so bad," Harry replied, though his stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. Death made a sound like dry leaves rustling, a laugh, Harry had come to realize. "Your mortal shell requires sustenance, Master of Death. Your relatives' attempts to weaken you are disappointing." "They've always been like this," Harry said with a shrug, setting aside his essay. These nocturnal conversations had become routine over the summer, a strange comfort in his isolation. "But my friends promised to write. Maybe they'll invite me to stay soon." Death moved closer, its form seeming to glide rather than walk. "The red-haired boy's family has indeed been discussing such an invitation. They worry for your well-being." Harry perked up. "Ron's family? They've been talking about me?" "Indeed. The mother especially. She senses your distress. Mrs. Weasley barely knows me, Harry said, puzzled. Some souls resonate with others across distances. Hers is maternal, protective. She feels drawn to care for you. Death tilted its hood slightly. A valuable connection. Cherish it. Harry smiled, warmed by the thought that Mrs. Weasley was concerned for him. Then another realization struck. Hang on, how do you know what the Weasleys are discussing? I am everywhere, Harry Potter. Where life exists, I am present, observing, waiting. Death extended a skeletal hand, tracing patterns in the air that briefly shimmered with faint blue light. I hear whispers beyond the veil. Conversations. Thoughts. Prayers. The living speak of death more often than they realize. That's a bit creepy, actually, Harry admitted. That rustling laugh again. Privacy is a mortal construct. I do not deliberately eavesdrop, but some conversations reach me nonetheless. Particularly those concerning my chosen master. Harry had grown more comfortable with Death's presence over the past month, but the title still felt alien, uncomfortable. I still don't understand why you chose me. I'm just... Harry. You have asked this question 7 times since our first meeting, Death observed. My answer remains unchanged. You are unique among mortals, touched by death yet embracing life. The perfect balance. But what does it actually mean? Being the master of death. So far all I can do is see you and, what was it you said last time? Sense things beyond the veil. Your abilities will emerge gradually, Death said, moving to the window and gazing out at the quiet suburb. You are young. Your magic is still developing, and with it, your connection to me and my realm. Harry sighed, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. So I just have to wait. Patience is a virtue few mortals master, Death said, a hint of amusement in its voice. Even those who live for centuries often rush through their days. Speaking of centuries, Harry said, reminded of something he'd been wondering, did you really know Nicholas Flamel? Before the stone was destroyed, I mean. Death turned back from the window. Nicholas Flamel and I had many appointments over 6 centuries. Each time, he declined to accompany me. He cheated you. No more than one cheats time by using a clock. The philosopher's stone was a clever manipulation of natural principles, not a violation of my authority. Death's voice carried no resentment. I am eternal, Harry Potter. 600 years is but a moment to me. Flamel merely delayed our final meeting. Harry considered this. And now? Since the stone is destroyed. Now Nicholas and Perenelle Flamel prepare for my arrival. They have set their affairs in order, distributed their considerable wealth, and wait peacefully. Death's voice softened. They will greet me as an old friend. The concept was strangely comforting, the idea of death not as something to be feared but as the completion of a long journey. Harry thought of Dumbledore's words about death being the next great adventure, and wondered if the headmaster held similar views. Do all wizards know you're real? Like, an actual entity? Harry asked. Few wizards or muggles perceive my true nature, Death replied. Most envision me as a concept rather than a being. Those who have sought the Hallows understand more, but even they comprehend only fragments of the truth. And what is the truth? Death seemed to grow still, considering its answer carefully. The truth, Harry Potter, is that I am older than your universe yet younger than existence itself. I am neither good nor evil but simply necessary. I am the counterbalance to life, the shadow that gives light meaning. Harry frowned, trying to grasp these abstract concepts. But you have opinions. You didn't like Voldemort trying to become immortal. You helped me destroy the stone. I appreciate the natural order, Death corrected. Just as your heart values its rhythmic beating, I value the proper cycle of existence. Tom Riddle's attempts to fracture his soul and anchor himself permanently to the mortal plane are disruptive. Fracture his soul. Harry repeated, latching onto the unfamiliar phrase. What do you mean? Death was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was more solemn than usual. Some knowledge is dangerous, even for the master of death. This is a conversation for another time, when you are better prepared. Harry wanted to protest, but the finality in Death's tone suggested the subject was closed, at least for now. Instead, he asked something else that had been troubling him. Will I ever be able to see my parents? Not bring them back, he added hastily, I understand that's not possible. But, talk to them, maybe. Just once. The question hung in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. Death moved closer to Harry, its robed form looming over his bed. The dead dwell beyond the veil, Harry Potter. Most mortals cannot perceive them without magical assistance such as the resurrection stone. Death extended a skeletal hand, almost but not quite touching Harry's chest, above his heart. But you are developing abilities beyond ordinary wizards. In time, you may learn to hear whispers from beyond, fleeting impressions, perhaps. Not conversations as you know them, but awareness. Hope fluttered in Harry's chest. So it is possible. Possible, yes. But not without cost. Death withdrew its hand. The veil exists for a reason. Those who focus too intently on the dead risk losing their connection to the living. Balance must be maintained. Before Harry could ask more questions, a loud snore from Uncle Vernon's bedroom reminded him of the late hour. Death seemed to sense his fatigue. Rest, Harry Potter. Dawn approaches, and with it, perhaps, better tidings. As Death began to fade, dissolving into the shadows of the bedroom, Harry called out softly, Will you be back tomorrow night? The entity's voice echoed in the darkness, already distant. I am never truly gone from your side, Master of Death. And then Harry was alone again, save for Hedwig watching him with her intelligent amber eyes. He returned to his essay, but his thoughts were elsewhere, dwelling on fragments of souls, whispers beyond veils, and the strange, ancient being that had chosen him as its master. Death's prediction of better tidings proved accurate. 3 days later, on Harry's birthday, a small fleet of owls arrived bearing cards and packages from his friends. From Hermione, a luxury eagle feather quill, from Hagrid, a hand-whittled wooden flute, and from Ron, a lengthy letter describing his family's plan to rescue Harry from Privet Drive the following week. We're coming to get you, mate, Ron had written in his untidy scrawl. Dad's borrowed a car from work. Don't worry about the muggles, Fred and George have ideas. Be ready Saturday night. The prospect of escape kept Harry's spirits high despite the Dursleys' continuing mistreatment, particularly after the disastrous dinner party where a house elf named Dobby had wreaked havoc. Uncle Vernon had installed bars on Harry's window and a cat flap in his door, transforming his bedroom into a prison. Hedwig was locked in her cage, unable to hunt, and Harry was allowed out only twice a day to use the bathroom. Death continued to visit nightly, sometimes merely observing in silence, other times engaging in philosophical discussions that stretched Harry's young mind. On the night before his planned rescue, Harry voiced a concern that had been troubling him. If I leave with the Weasleys tomorrow, will you still be able to find me? Death, who had been examining Hedwig's cage with apparent fascination, turned toward him. Distance is meaningless to me, Harry Potter. I exist everywhere simultaneously. But will you still visit? Like this? Does my company provide comfort? Death asked, sounding genuinely curious. Harry considered the question. It's strange, but, yes. Talking to you makes me feel less alone. Even if half the time I don't understand what you're saying. Then I shall continue to manifest when appropriate. Death moved toward the barred window, examining the crude restraints. These will prove no obstacle to your friends tomorrow. You know their plan. I know many possible futures, Death replied cryptically. Some clearer than others. The Weasley twins possess remarkable ingenuity. Their solution will be unconventional. Harry grinned, imagining Fred and George's idea of a rescue mission. As long as it works. Indeed. Death lingered by the window, its form silhouetted against the starry sky beyond. The coming school year will bring new challenges, Harry Potter. Darker forces stir. Harry's smile faded. Voldemort again. Tom Riddle's shade retreated after your confrontation, weakened but not destroyed. He will seek alternative paths to return. Death turned back to face Harry, the darkness within its hood seeming deeper than usual. But other dangers may emerge first. What kind of dangers? Harry asked, apprehension building in his chest. Death was silent for a long moment, as though deliberating how much to reveal. I cannot speak directly of future events. Such knowledge can alter the course of fate in unpredictable ways. But I can offer this warning, listen carefully to whispers others cannot hear. Trust your developing senses. That's not very specific, Harry pointed out, frustration edging his voice. Specificity is not my forte, Death acknowledged, that dry leaf rustle suggesting amusement. I deal in endings, Harry Potter, not the convoluted paths that lead to them. Harry sighed, recognizing he would get no clearer answer tonight. Will you at least tell me more about the Hallows? You mentioned 3 of them, but I only know about my cloak. This, at least, seemed a topic Death was willing to discuss. The Deathly Hallows were gifts I bestowed upon 3 brothers who cleverly evaded me at a river crossing, or so the story goes. So the tale isn't true? Harry asked, surprised. Mortal stories simplify complex truths, Death replied. The Quirrell brothers were indeed remarkable wizards who created objects of extraordinary power. Whether I personally handed them these items or they crafted them through their own genius is perhaps less important than the items themselves. Harry leaned forward, eager for knowledge about his mysterious inheritance. So what are the other Hallows? The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand ever created, capable of magic beyond ordinary limitations. Death's voice took on a storyteller's cadence. The Resurrection Stone, which can recall shades of the departed from beyond the veil. And the Cloak of Invisibility, which you now possess, unique among invisibility cloaks for its permanence and its ability to conceal the wearer from all detection, including mine. And together they make someone the master of death. But I only have the cloak. The Hallows are physical manifestations of a deeper truth, Death said. Tools that represent mastery, not its source. You, Harry Potter, were chosen not because you possessed a Hallow, but because of what already resided within you. The cloak merely facilitated our connection. Harry frowned, trying to understand. So I don't need all 3. What you need and what might prove useful are different matters, Death said enigmatically. The other Hallows may find their way to you in time, or they may not. Your path as Master of Death does not depend on them. Before Harry could press for clearer answers, Death's form began to fade. Dawn approaches. Your final day in this dwelling should be interesting. We shall speak again at your next destination. And with that, Death vanished, leaving Harry with more questions than answers. He flopped back on his bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering what exactly it meant to be chosen by Death for reasons beyond his comprehension. The entity's warnings about the coming school year troubled him too. What new dangers could be worse than facing Voldemort and Quirrell? But those were concerns for another day. Tonight, he needed to prepare for his escape from Privet Drive. The Weasleys' rescue proved just as unconventional as Death had hinted. Shortly after midnight, Ron, Fred, and George arrived outside Harry's window in a turquoise Ford Anglia that flew. Using a rope, they pulled away the bars, helped Harry pack his trunk, and spirited him away into the night sky, leaving Uncle Vernon roaring impotently from the bedroom window. The burrow, the Weasleys' home, was everything Privet Drive was not: chaotic, magical, and bursting with life. The ramshackle house seemed held together by magic more than architectural principles, with room upon room stacked precariously atop one another. Harry was welcomed warmly by Mrs. Weasley, after she finished scolding her sons for the flying car escapade, and given Ron's bedroom to share. For the first few days, Harry was too busy enjoying freedom, proper meals, and the company of the boisterous Weasley family to think much about death or the coming school year. He played Quidditch in the paddock behind the house, degnomed the garden with Ron, and marveled at Mr. Weasley's enchanted Muggle artifacts in the shed. Death did not manifest visibly during this time, though occasionally Harry felt that distinctive chill, a reminder of the entity's omnipresence. It wasn't until nearly a week into his stay, during a particularly hot afternoon when the other Weasley children were swimming in the pond, that Death appeared to him again. Harry had begged off the swimming expedition, claiming fatigue from the morning's Quidditch session. In truth, he'd been experiencing strange sensations since arriving at the burrow, whispers at the edge of his hearing, flickers of movement in his peripheral vision. Death's words about whispers beyond the veil had been haunting him, and he wanted time alone to process these new perceptions. He sat on Ron's windowsill, gazing out at the orchard below, when the temperature around him plummeted despite the summer heat. "Your senses are developing more rapidly than anticipated," Death observed, materializing beside him. "The proximity to magical energy in this dwelling accelerates the process." Harry wasn't startled by the sudden appearance, he'd grown accustomed to Death's dramatic entrances. "I keep hearing things. Voices sometimes, but not clear words. And I see. I don't know, shapes or movements that aren't really there." "They are there," Death corrected, "but not on the physical plane most mortals perceive. You are glimpsing beyond the veil." "Beyond the veil, you mean I'm seeing ghosts?" "Not precisely." Death moved to stand before him, its robed form blocking the sunlight and casting the room in shadow. "Hogwarts ghosts are imprints of departed souls who chose to remain tethered to the physical world. What you perceive are echoes, moments when the veil thins, allowing impressions to bleed through from my realm to yours." Harry frowned, trying to understand. "So they're not actually spirits?" "Think of it as overhearing fragments of conversation from another room," Death explained. "You catch words, tones, impressions, but not full communication. The speakers are not intentionally addressing you." "But why am I hearing them now? Why not before?" "Your connection to my realm strengthens daily. Additionally, magical dwellings often harbor stronger echoes. This house has witnessed 7 births, 3 deaths, and countless significant moments of joy and sorrow. Such experiences leave impressions." Harry's eyes widened. "Deaths? Here in the burrow?" "2 grandparents, one in this very room," Death said, gesturing to a corner near Ron's cluttered desk. "And a stillborn child, many years ago. The mother who now cares for you lost a daughter before her only daughter was born." "Mrs. Weasley?" Harry whispered, horrified. "She lost a baby?" "Life and death are intertwined, Harry Potter. Every family has its griefs, hidden or acknowledged." Death's voice carried no judgment, only a matter-of-fact acceptance. "The Weasleys celebrate life all the more vibrantly for having known loss." Harry looked toward the corner Death had indicated, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw something, a shimmering distortion in the air, like heat rising from pavement. Then it was gone. "Will these perceptions get stronger?" he asked. "Yes. At Hogwarts, where magic and history run deeper still, you will sense much more." Death's hood tilted slightly. "You must learn to filter these impressions, lest they overwhelm you." "How do I do that?" "Focus on your physical surroundings. Ground yourself in the present moment. The living should command more of your attention than the echoes of the dead." Harry nodded, already practicing by concentrating on the solid windowsill beneath him, the warm summer air, the distant shouts and laughter from the pond. The whispers receded slightly. "There is another matter we must discuss," Death continued. "The fractured soul I mentioned previously." Harry's attention snapped back fully. "Voldemort's soul? You said he'd fractured it somehow." "Indeed. It is time you understood more about your connection to Tom Riddle." Death seemed to grow taller, more imposing. "There are magical means by which a wizard can split their soul and anchor the fragments to physical objects. The process requires the supreme act of evil, murder, and creates what wizards call a Horcrux. And Voldemort made one of these Horcruxes. Not one, Death said gravely. Several. Each murder, each split, drove him further from humanity and deeper into madness. This is how he survived the rebounding killing curse that scarred you. His body was destroyed, but his soul remained tethered to the mortal plane. Harry felt sick. The concept of deliberately mutilating one's soul was horrifying. How many did he make? The exact number remains unclear even to me. Soul magic obscures my perception. Death moved closer, its voice dropping lower. But one such fragment approaches this dwelling. I sense its malevolence. Here. Harry jumped to his feet, panic surging through him. Voldemort is coming to the burrow. Not Voldemort himself, but an object containing a piece of his soul. A repository of memory and malice, capable of influencing those who possess it. We have to warn the Weasleys. Harry exclaimed, moving toward the door. Death raised a skeletal hand, halting him. The fragment has not yet arrived. It approaches through indirect means. When it manifests, you will recognize it through your connection to me, and through your own unique bond with Tom Riddle. What bond? I don't have a bond with Voldemort. Death was silent for a long moment, as though considering how to proceed. The night your parents died, unexpected magic occurred. The rebounding curse, your mother's sacrifice, the fracturing of Riddle's already damaged soul, these created a connection between you and the Dark Lord. It is why your scar pains you in his presence. Harry unconsciously touched the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. So I can sense when he's near. Is that the bond? Again, that pregnant pause. For now, let us say that your sensitivity to Tom Riddle's presence will help you identify the approaching Horcrux. Be vigilant, Harry Potter. Dark artifacts often disguise their true nature. Harry wanted to press for more answers, but he recognized the evasion for what it was. Death, for all their conversations, still kept certain knowledge from him, perhaps for good reason. I'll be careful, he promised instead. And I'll tell Ron and Hermione to watch for anything strange. Your friends remain your greatest strength, Death acknowledged. Their loyalty will prove crucial in the times ahead. With that cryptic statement, Death began to fade, its form becoming transparent. We shall speak again at Hogwarts. Remember what I have taught you about filtering the voices. And Harry Potter, Death's voice lingered even as its form disappeared completely. When shopping for school supplies, be wary of those with fractured souls. Not all who appear whole are. Then the temperature returned to normal, and Harry was alone once more, his mind spinning with new worries and warnings. The warning about shopping for school supplies made more sense a few days later when the Weasleys' Hogwarts letters arrived, along with the considerable list of required books for Gilderoy Lockhart's defense against the dark arts classes. Mrs. Weasley announced they would travel to Diagon Alley the following Wednesday, using Floo powder, a magical transportation method Harry had never encountered. The Floo network proved disastrous for Harry. Unfamiliar with the process and choking on ash, he mispronounced Diagon Alley, and found himself stumbling out of a fireplace in a dingy, sinister shop he didn't recognize. Through the grimy window, he could see he'd landed in Nocturne Alley, a place Hagrid had once mentioned as being dedicated to the dark arts. As Harry searched for an exit, trying to remain inconspicuous among the disturbing magical artifacts, he felt a sudden, intense chill that had nothing to do with Death's presence. An ornate black cabinet near the wall seemed to emanate malevolence, calling to him in a way he couldn't articulate. Drawn toward it against his better judgment, Harry reached out a trembling hand. "Touch nothing, Harry Potter," hissed a familiar voice directly beside him. Harry jerked back, startled. Death stood beside him, more substantial than usual, its robed form almost opaque in the dimly lit shop. "What is that thing?" Harry whispered, keeping a wary eye on the shop's entrance where voices could be heard approaching. "A vanishing cabinet, damaged, but dangerous in its own right." But that is not your concern now. Death gestured toward the door. Hide. Someone approaches who must not find you here. Harry ducked behind a large black sarcophagus just as the bell over the shop door jingled. Through a narrow gap, he watched Draco Malfoy enter, followed by his father, a tall man with the same pale, pointed features and cold gray eyes. "Touch nothing, Draco," said Mr. Malfoy, unknowingly echoing Death's warning. Harry observed intense silence as the elder Malfoy conducted business with the shop's owner, Mr. Borgin. Their conversation revealed that the Malfoys were selling dark artifacts from their home, concerned about ministry raids. Harry's attention, however, was repeatedly drawn to Lucius Malfoy himself, or rather, to what Harry could now perceive around him. A faint, sickly green aura seemed to cling to Mr. Malfoy, concentrated most strongly around his walking stick. With his enhanced senses, Harry could almost see something writhing beneath the polished exterior, a malevolent presence that called to mind Death's warning about fractured souls. "He carries darkness," Death confirmed, following Harry's gaze. "Though he himself is not fractured. Merely, tainted by prolonged exposure." Before Harry could process this information, the Malfoys concluded their business and departed. Harry waited until Borgin disappeared into a back room before slipping out of the shop, only to find himself lost in the twisting alleyways of Nocturne Alley. "This way," Death instructed, gliding ahead of him. "The half-giant approaches. He will return you to your companions." Sure enough, Harry soon encountered Hagrid, who was buying flesh-eating slug repellent and was horrified to find Harry in such a disreputable area. The groundskeeper escorted him back to Diagon Alley, where they found the Weasleys and Hermione frantically searching for him. After recounting a censored version of his misadventure, omitting Death's guidance, Harry joined his friends for their shopping expedition. The day proceeded normally until they reached Flourish and Blots, where Gilderoy Lockhart was signing copies of his autobiography. The flamboyant wizard pulled Harry into an unwanted photo opportunity, announcing to the crowd that he would be teaching at Hogwarts that year. As Harry tried to escape the limelight, he found himself face to face with Draco Malfoy, who wasted no time in taunting him. The situation escalated when Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy arrived, exchanging thinly veiled insults that quickly devolved into a physical scuffle. During the commotion, Harry noticed Mr. Malfoy handling Ginny Weasley's second-hand books with obvious disdain. And then he saw it, a flicker of that same malevolent energy transferring from Malfoy's hand to Ginny's cauldron as he returned her battered copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. The sickly green aura briefly enveloped a small black book slipped among Ginny's schoolbooks before fading from Harry's enhanced vision. "The fragment approaches through indirect means," Death had warned. Harry realized with a jolt that he had just witnessed Lucius Malfoy planting a Horcrux on an unsuspecting Ginny Weasley. Harry tried to intervene, but Hagrid was already separating Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy, and in the confusion, he lost sight of Ginny and her cauldron of books. By the time order was restored and they left the bookshop, Harry had no way of knowing which book had been contaminated or how to explain his suspicions without revealing his connection to Death. That evening, back at the Burrow, Harry found himself struggling with this dilemma. He needed to warn someone about the dark object now in their home, but how could he explain how he knew? Ron would think he was mental, and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley might not believe him without evidence. He was still deliberating when Death materialized in Ron's darkened bedroom. Ron snored peacefully in the other bed, oblivious to the entity's presence. "You recognize the Horcrux," Death observed without preamble. "Your senses grow stronger." "Malfoy put it in Ginny's cauldron," Harry whispered. "It looked like an old diary or something. What do I do? How do I get it away from her?" "Direct intervention may prove difficult," Death acknowledged. "The fragment will resist removal, forming attachments to its chosen host." "Chosen host? You mean it'll possess her or something?" Harry felt sick at the thought. Horcruxes feed on the life force of those who form emotional connections to them. The girl is vulnerable, young, uncertain, overlooked among her brothers. Death moved toward the window, gazing out at the moonlit orchard. The fragment will offer what she most desires: understanding, attention, validation. Then I have to warn her. Tell her not to use it. And how will you explain your knowledge? Death asked reasonably. Consider, too, that direct warnings may achieve the opposite effect. Forbidden objects hold particular fascination for the young. Harry ran a frustrated hand through his hair. So I'm just supposed to do nothing? Let Voldemort possess Ron's sister. I did not say that. Death turned back to face him. Observation is your first task. Learn which object houses the fragment. Watch for signs of its influence. When you understand the situation more fully, then act. That could take too long. Patience, Harry Potter. At Hogwarts, you will have more resources at your disposal. The fragment will take time to gain strength. You have a window of opportunity before real damage occurs. Harry wasn't satisfied with this approach but recognized the wisdom in not acting rashly. Fine. I'll wait and watch. But as soon as I know for sure which book it is, I'm going to find a way to destroy it. Destroying a Horcrux requires extraordinary means, Death cautioned. Few substances can damage a soul fragment beyond repair. This is not a task to undertake without proper knowledge and tools. Then what am I supposed to do when I find it? Hand it over to Dumbledore. The headmaster would indeed be a logical ally. Death seemed to consider the matter. He possesses both the wisdom to understand the threat and the means to neutralize it. Harry nodded, slightly relieved to have something resembling a plan. I'll try to figure out which book it is on the train to Hogwarts. Ginny will probably have them out while we're traveling. A reasonable approach. Death began to fade, becoming translucent. We shall speak again at Hogwarts, Harry Potter. Remember to practice filtering the voices beyond the veil. The castle teems with them. After Death vanished, Harry lay awake for a long time, thinking about Horcruxes and fractured souls. The concept was horrifying, deliberately splitting one's soul through murder, preserving the fragments in objects that could possess the innocent. No wonder Death considered it an abomination against the natural order. The fact that a piece of Voldemort was now living under the same roof, potentially targeting the youngest Weasley, made Harry's skin crawl. He resolved to be more observant of Ginny's behavior and possessions, looking for any sign of which book might contain the Horcrux. With these troubling thoughts swirling in his mind, Harry finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, his dreams filled with whispers from beyond a veil he couldn't quite see. The journey to Hogwarts began with near disaster when Harry and Ron found themselves unable to pass through the barrier at platform 9 3/4. Their ill-advised solution, flying Mr. Weasley's enchanted car to Hogwarts, resulted in a damaged vehicle, a close encounter with the Hogwarts Express, and a spectacular crash into the Whomping Willow on school grounds. Professor Snape had been apoplectic, threatening expulsion until Professor McGonagall and Headmaster Dumbledore intervened. They escaped with detention and a stern warning, though the howler Ron received from Mrs. Weasley at breakfast the next morning felt like additional punishment. Despite this inauspicious start, Harry was relieved to be back at Hogwarts. The castle felt like home in a way Privet Drive never had, and even with the detentions looming, he was excited for classes to begin. His enthusiasm dampened somewhat when their first defense against the dark arts lesson with Gilderoy Lockhart proved to be less about defense and more about the professor's supposed achievements. Releasing a cage of mischievous Cornish pixies into the classroom before fleeing himself hardly inspired confidence in Lockhart's abilities. As Harry, Ron, and Hermione rounded up the destructive creatures after Lockhart's retreat, Harry couldn't help but wonder how such an incompetent wizard had been appointed to such an important position. At least the pixies are real, Hermione said defensively when Ron questioned Lockhart's credentials. It's good to get practical experience. Practical? Ron gaped at her. Hermione, he didn't have a clue what he was doing. Rubbish, Hermione said. You've read his books, look at all those amazing things he's done, he says he's done, Harry muttered, earning a glare from Hermione. The first few days at Hogwarts brought another challenge Harry had been anticipating, the increased sensitivity to whispers beyond the veil that death had warned him about. The castle, with its thousand-year history of magic and emotion, practically hummed with echoes from the past. Walking down corridors, Harry would catch fragments of conversations that no one else heard, students discussing exams from centuries past, arguments between long-dead professors, snippets of songs from feasts held generations ago. Sometimes the whispers were accompanied by visual impressions, fleeting apparitions different from the castle's regular ghosts. These weren't fully formed specters like nearly headless Nick but rather momentary glimpses, a hand disappearing around a corner, the swish of a robe where no one stood, a face briefly reflected in a window. Death had instructed him to filter these impressions, to ground himself in the physical present, but the sheer volume of echoes at Hogwarts made this challenging. By the end of the first week, Harry had developed a near-constant headache from the effort of blocking out the spectral noise. "You look terrible, mate," Ron observed at breakfast on Saturday morning. "Still having trouble sleeping?" Harry nodded, not mentioning that his insomnia stemmed from whispers that grew more insistent at night when the castle quieted. "Just need to adjust to being back, I suppose." Hermione studied him with concern. "Perhaps you should see Madame Pomfrey. You could have a low-grade fever or something." "I'm fine," Harry insisted, though the dark circles under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Just need some fresh air. Think I'll go watch the Gryffindor Quidditch practice later." In truth, Harry was hoping to find a quiet corner of the grounds to summon death. He needed guidance on managing these overwhelming sensations before they interfered with his schoolwork, or drove him mad. The entity hadn't appeared since their conversation at the Burrow, though Harry occasionally felt its familiar chill presence, particularly in the more ancient parts of the castle. After breakfast, Harry made his excuses and headed for the lake. Finding a secluded spot beneath a willow tree, he sat cross-legged on the grass and closed his eyes, focusing on the sensation he now associated with death. "Your discomfort is evident," came the familiar resonant voice after several minutes of concentration. The castle's echoes proved challenging. Harry opened his eyes to find death standing before him, its robed form solid against the morning sunlight. "I can hardly think with all the whispers. How do I make them stop?" "Not stop, manage," Death corrected, moving to stand beside the tree. "Consider it similar to focusing your vision. When you look at a crowded room, you do not process every detail simultaneously. You select what merits attention. But I don't know how to select with these voices. They're all equally loud. Then you must establish boundaries." Death made a sweeping gesture with its skeletal hand. "Visualize a sphere of quiet around yourself. Acknowledge the voices exist beyond that sphere but choose not to extend your awareness to them." Harry frowned skeptically but closed his eyes again, trying to imagine the protective bubble Death described. To his surprise, the technique helped somewhat, the whispers receded to a more manageable murmur. "It's working," he said, opening his eyes. "Not perfect, but better. Practice will strengthen your control," Death assured him. "In time, you may learn to selectively listen to specific echoes, a useful skill for one in your position." "My position as Master of Death, you mean?" "Indeed. The past often holds keys to present challenges." Death seemed to gaze across the lake, though its hoodless face made it impossible to track its attention. "Have you identified the Horcrux?" Harry sighed, shaking his head. "I haven't had much chance to observe Ginny. She's in a different year, different classes. And on the train, she sat with her own friends." "The fragment grows stronger," Death warned. "I sense its awakening consciousness. It has found a receptive vessel." A chill ran down Harry's spine. "You mean it's already affecting her?" "How can I tell?" "Watch for changes in behavior. Unexplained absences. Periods of missing time or memory. Fatigue beyond normal explanation." Death turned back to Harry. "The fragment will begin subtly, but its influence will grow more pronounced as it gains strength. Should I just tell Dumbledore now? Even without knowing which book it is?" "The headmaster is distracted by other matters." And without evidence, your claims may seem fanciful. Death was silent for a moment, then added, there is another approach. Your enhanced senses should allow you to perceive the Horcrux directly when in close proximity. The fragment calls to fragment. Harry frowned, not understanding the cryptic statement. What do you mean? Before Death could explain further, voices approached from around the lake shore, Gryffindor Quidditch players heading to the pitch for practice. Death began to fade. Seek the girl out directly, it advised as its form dissolved. Your senses will confirm what logic cannot. Then Death was gone, leaving Harry with partial guidance and new worries about Ginny Weasley. He rose from the grass, dusting off his robes and heading toward the Quidditch pitch. Perhaps after watching practice, he could find an opportunity to observe Ginny more closely back in the common room. Upon reaching the pitch, however, Harry discovered a problem. The Slytherin team had also booked the field for practice, leading to a confrontation between the rival teams. Draco Malfoy was revealed to be Slytherin's new Seeker, a position his father had essentially bought for him by donating 7 top-of-the-line Nimbus 2001 brooms to the team. At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, Hermione said sharply. They got in on pure talent. Malfoy's face went even paler than usual. No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood, he spat. The effect was immediate. The Gryffindor team erupted in outrage, with Fred and George lunging for Malfoy while Alicia Spinnet shrieked, "How dare you!" Ron plunged his hand into his robes, pulled out his wand, and yelled, "You'll pay for that one, Malfoy." Before firing a spell that backfired spectacularly due to his broken wand. As Ron collapsed, belching slugs, Harry and Hermione rushed him away from the jeering Slytherins toward Hagrid's cabin. While Hagrid helped Ron with his slug problem, Harry explained what mudblood meant, a foul name for someone Muggleborn, implying dirty blood. It's ridiculous, Harry said firmly, seeing Hermione's hurt expression. Most wizards today are half-blood anyway. If wizards hadn't married Muggles, we'd have died out. Hagrid nodded approvingly. Well said, Harry. The conversation eventually turned to Lockhart, whom Hagrid clearly disliked, and then to Ron's detention polishing silver in the trophy room with Filch. Harry mentioned his own detention with Lockhart, scheduled for that evening. Help Lockhart answer his fan mail? Hagrid said, trying unsuccessfully to hide a grin. Rather you than me, Harry. By the time they returned to the castle for lunch, Ron was producing only occasional slugs, and Harry had almost forgotten his mission to observe Ginny. He was reminded when they entered the Great Hall and he spotted her sitting at the far end of the Gryffindor table, writing intently in a small black book. Harry froze, instantly recognizing the book's aura even from a distance. The same sickly green energy he'd glimpsed in Flourish and Blots now surrounded Ginny, concentrated most intensely around the diary. Even more alarming, tendrils of that malevolent energy seemed to be extending from the book into Ginny herself, like parasitic roots seeking nourishment. Harry? What's wrong? Hermione asked, noticing his sudden stillness. Nothing, Harry said automatically, tearing his gaze away from the disturbing sight. Just, thought I forgot something in Hagrid's cabin. They sat down to lunch, but Harry could hardly eat, his attention repeatedly drawn to Ginny and the Horcrux she was unwittingly feeding with her thoughts and emotions. He needed to get that diary away from her, but how? He couldn't simply grab it without explanation. The opportunity to approach her didn't materialize that day. After lunch, Hermione dragged Harry and a still occasionally slugging Ron to the library to work on Snape's potions essay. By the time they returned to the common room before dinner, Ginny and the diary were nowhere to be seen. Harry's detention with Lockhart that evening proved to be as mind-numbing as expected, addressing envelopes to the professor's countless admirers while enduring his self-aggrandizing commentary. What was unexpected, however, was the voice Harry heard halfway through the detention, a voice chilling in its cold, murderous intent. Come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you. Harry jumped up, looking around wildly. What? I know, said Lockhart, mistaking Harry's reaction. 6 solid months at the top of the bestseller list. Broke all records. No, said Harry frantically. That voice. Voice? Lockhart looked puzzled. What voice? It was then that Harry realized Lockhart couldn't hear it. The voice was speaking again, moving away, talking about blood and killing. When Harry's detention finally ended, he hurried back to Gryffindor Tower, his mind racing. Was this another manifestation of his ability to hear whispers beyond the veil? But no, this voice hadn't sounded like the echo-like fragments he'd been experiencing throughout the castle. It had been present, immediate, and filled with murderous intent. Most disturbingly, it had been familiar somehow, though Harry couldn't place where he'd heard it before. The common room was nearly empty when he arrived, most students already in bed. Harry spotted Hermione studying by the fire and joined her, keeping his voice low as he described the disembodied voice. And Lockhart couldn't hear it at all, she asked, frowning thoughtfully. Not a word, Harry confirmed. It was moving away, talking about killing someone. Hermione bit her lip. Hearing voices no one else can hear isn't a good sign, Harry, even in the wizarding world. I know that, Harry said, irritated. But this was different from. He stopped, not wanting to explain his newfound ability to hear echoes from beyond the veil. Different from what? Hermione prompted. Nothing, Harry mumbled. Just. I'm sure it was real. Maybe some kind of magical creature only certain people can hear. Maybe, Hermione said, though she looked unconvinced. We should look into it tomorrow. For now, you should get some sleep. You look exhausted. Harry couldn't argue with that assessment. Between the constant whispers, the discovery of the Horcrux, and now this mysterious voice, his mind felt like it might snap from the strain. He bid Hermione goodnight and climbed the stairs to his dormitory, hoping for a few hours of uninterrupted rest. But sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams more vivid and disturbing than the waking whispers, dreams of a massive serpent slithering through pipes, of ink flowing like blood, and of Tom Riddle's high, cold laugh echoing from the pages of a diary that pulsed with sickly green light. Autumn descended on Hogwarts, bringing with it driving rain, howling winds, and an increase in the castle's spectral activity. Harry gradually improved his ability to filter the whispers beyond the veil, though sudden surges still occasionally broke through his mental barriers, particularly when he was tired or stressed. Death continued to visit sporadically, materializing in empty corridors or beside Harry's bed after his dorm mates had fallen asleep. These conversations often centered on the Horcrux in Ginny's possession and the mysterious voice Harry had heard during his detention with Lockhart. The voice is not an echo from my realm, Death confirmed during one such midnight visitation. It exists in your world, though hidden from ordinary perception. Then why can I hear it when others can't? Harry asked, keeping his voice to a whisper to avoid waking Ron. Your connection to Tom Riddle grants you certain sensitivities. Death moved toward the window, frost forming on the glass where its robes brushed against it. The fragment in the diary awakens other fragments. Harry frowned, trying to understand. So this voice is connected to Voldemort somehow. In a manner of speaking. Death seemed reluctant to elaborate. Watch for patterns, Harry Potter. When the voice speaks, where does it travel? What follows in its wake? Before Harry could press for clearer answers, a log shifted in the common room fireplace below, sending up a shower of sparks. Death tilted its hood toward the sound. We are not alone, it observed. The girl approaches. Death vanished as Harry strained his ears, catching the soft sound of footsteps on the spiral staircase leading from the girls' dormitories. Moving carefully to avoid waking his dormmates, Harry crept to the door and peered down into the common room. Ginny Weasley stood before the dying fire, her face unnaturally blank, the black diary clutched in her hands. The sickly green aura surrounding her had grown stronger since Harry had first noticed it, now pulsating in rhythm with her heartbeat. Most alarmingly, her eyes seemed glazed and unfocused, as though she were sleepwalking. As Harry watched, frozen in indecision, Ginny moved toward the portrait hole. She waved her hand before it in a strange gesture, and the portrait swung open without her speaking the password. Then she stepped through, disappearing into the darkened corridor beyond. Harry didn't hesitate. Grabbing his invisibility cloak from his trunk, he threw it over his shoulders and hurried after her. The castle corridors were eerily silent at this hour, the only sounds being Ginny's soft footsteps and the occasional snore from a portrait. He followed her down several flights of stairs and through rarely used passages, wondering if he should intervene. Death had warned that the Horcrux would possess its victim, and Ginny's blank expression and mechanical movements certainly suggested some form of control. But Harry had no plan for safely separating her from the diary, and he worried that confronting her while she was under its influence might be dangerous, for her or for him. Finally, Ginny stopped before a girl's bathroom on the first floor. Harry recognized it as the one always out of order, the one haunted by moaning Myrtle. Ginny stood motionless for several seconds, then raised her hand and traced a strange symbol on the door, a snake, Harry realized with a jolt. As she completed the pattern, he heard a faint click, and the door swung inward. Harry hesitated. Following a possessed Ginny into a girl's bathroom in the middle of the night seemed like a spectacularly bad idea, but he couldn't just abandon her to the Horcrux's influence. Steeling himself, he slipped in behind her before the door closed. The bathroom was dimly lit by moonlight filtering through high windows. Ginny moved directly to the circular arrangement of sinks in the center, stopping before one particular basin. Again, her hand traced that serpentine pattern, but this time, she spoke, or rather, hissed. The sound was inhuman, a series of soft sibilant noises that raised the hairs on the back of Harry's neck. To his astonishment, the sink began to move. The entire fixture slid downward, revealing a large pipe wide enough for a person to slide into. Without hesitation, Ginny climbed into the opening and disappeared from view. Harry stood frozen in shock. The hissing sound Ginny had made, it was the same as the murderous voice he'd been hearing. But how could Ginny be producing that voice? Unless. The fragment speaks through her, came Death's whisper directly beside him, though the entity remained invisible. It awakens that which slumbers below. What's down there? Harry asked, staring at the open pipe. An ancient guardian. A creature born of Salazar Slytherin's paranoia and prejudice. Death's voice carried a rare note of concern. You must not follow her now. The fragment is too strong, the beast too deadly. Even for you. But I can't just leave her. Harry protested. She will return. The fragment is not yet strong enough to maintain control for long periods. It merely prepares the way. The temperature around Harry dropped further. Alert the headmaster. The chamber has been opened once more. Chamber? You mean, the Chamber of Secrets, yes. Slytherin's final legacy and the prison of his monster. Harry's mind raced, connecting pieces of information he'd gathered over recent weeks. The diary was Riddle's Horcrux. Riddle was using Ginny to access some hidden chamber containing a monster. The monster was producing the murderous voice Harry could hear moving through the walls. Is the monster what's making that voice I've been hearing? He asked. Yes. A serpent of immense size and deadly gaze. You hear its voice because you share a rare gift with Salazar Slytherin and Tom Riddle, the ability to speak Parseltongue, the language of snakes. This revelation hit Harry like a physical blow. He could speak to snakes. He remembered the boa constrictor at the zoo before his first year, how he'd somehow set it free and thought it had thanked him. At the time, he'd attributed it to accidental magic, not realizing he'd been conversing with the snake. Why can I speak Parseltongue? He asked, dreading the answer. Is it because of my connection to Voldemort? Death was silent for a moment. That is a complex question with an answer you are not yet prepared to hear fully. For now, know that your ability to hear the basilisk, for that is what dwells below, may prove useful, but also dangerous. The creature kills with a direct gaze. Even indirect eye contact can petrify. A basilisk? Harry whispered, horrified. And Ginny's down there with it? The fragment protects its vessel while she serves its purpose. She faces greater danger from the diary itself than from the serpent at present. The sink began to move again, rising back into position and sealing the entrance to the chamber. Death's voice took on greater urgency. Return to your dormitory now. The girl will emerge elsewhere and find her way back, with no memory of her actions tonight. Tomorrow, seek audience with Dumbledore. Tell him what you have witnessed. But, this is not a battle you can fight alone, Harry Potter. Not yet. The basilisk is immune to most magic, and the diary can only be destroyed by extraordinary means. Death's presence began to withdraw. Patience and preparation. Remember my teachings. Left alone in the moonlit bathroom, Harry stood indecisively for several moments, torn between waiting for Ginny to reappear and following Death's advice. Eventually, logic prevailed. He couldn't navigate the unknown passages beneath the school, couldn't face a basilisk without preparation, and certainly couldn't explain his presence if Ginny emerged and found him waiting. Reluctantly, he returned to Gryffindor Tower, his mind churning with revelations. A piece of Voldemort's soul was possessing Ginny Weasley, using her to open Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets and release a basilisk. He, Harry, could speak Parseltongue, apparently because of some connection to Voldemort that Death refused to fully explain. And tomorrow, he somehow needed to convince Dumbledore of all this without revealing his source. Sleep was a distant memory as Harry lay awake, listening for Ginny's return. Nearly 2 hours later, he heard the portrait hole open and close, followed by soft footsteps on the girl's staircase. Only then did he finally drift into uneasy slumber, his dreams filled with slithering shadows and ink-stained hands. Harry's plan to speak with Dumbledore the following day was thwarted by circumstances beyond his control. The headmaster was called away to the Ministry of Magic for an emergency meeting of the Wisengamot, according to Professor McGonagall, and wasn't expected back until late evening. Reluctant to share his concerns with another professor without Dumbledore's guidance, Harry decided to keep a close eye on Ginny instead. She appeared at breakfast looking pale and exhausted, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept well after her midnight excursion. The black diary was nowhere to be seen, but the sickly green aura clung to her still, though fainter than before. Ginny doesn't look well, Hermione observed as they walked to herbology after breakfast. I mentioned it to Percy, and he said she's been having nightmares. First year can be stressful, I suppose. Harry bit back the urge to reveal what he knew. Without evidence, his claims about possession and hidden chambers would sound delusional. Instead, he made a noncommittal noise and changed the subject, asking about their upcoming herbology lesson with the mandrakes. Professor Sprout had them repotting the adolescent mandrakes, whose cries could now knock a person out for several hours. As they worked in pairs, fitting earmuffs and wrestling the ugly, squirming plants into larger pots, Harry found his thoughts returning to the Chamber of Secrets. If Death was right, and the diary was using Ginny to open the chamber and release a basilisk, then the school was in terrible danger. A creature that could kill with a glance, controlled by a fragment of Voldemort's soul, loose in a castle full of children, it was a nightmare scenario. And yet, nothing had happened. No attacks, no mysterious sightings, not even rumors of strange occurrences. Perhaps, Harry thought hopefully, the basilisk was still confined somehow. Maybe opening the chamber was just the first step in a more complex plan that would take time to unfold. If so, he might still have a window of opportunity to intervene before anyone got hurt. His contemplation was interrupted by the end of the lesson. As the class filed out of the greenhouse, Harry found himself walking beside Neville Longbottom, who looked troubled. "All right, Neville?" Harry asked. Neville jumped slightly, as though startled by the question. "Oh. Yes, just thinking. My Gran wrote this morning. Says there are rumors at the ministry about something bad happening at Hogwarts soon. She wanted me to be careful." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "Did she say what kind of bad thing?" No, just that it reminded her of stories her parents told her from when they were at Hogwarts. About some chamber and a student dying. Neville shuddered. Probably just gossip, but it spooked me a bit. Before Harry could ask more questions, they reached the castle, and Neville hurried ahead to Transfiguration, leaving Harry with yet another piece of the unsettling puzzle. If Neville's Gran had heard rumors about the Chamber of Secrets, then perhaps history was indeed repeating itself. Perhaps the chamber had been opened before. The opportunity to investigate this theory came later that day in History of Magic, normally the dullest class at Hogwarts. Professor Binns, the ghostly teacher who seemed oblivious to his own death, was droning on about the International Warlock Convention of 1289 when Hermione raised her hand, an unprecedented interruption that actually startled Binns into silence. Miss Granger, Professor. I was wondering if you could tell us anything about the Chamber of Secrets. The effect on the class was immediate. Everyone sat up, suddenly alert. Professor Binns blinked, clearly thrown by this deviation from his carefully prepared notes. My subject is History of Magic, he said dryly. I deal with facts, Miss Granger, not myths and legends. But Hermione persisted, joined by other students eager for any break in the monotony. Finally, Binns relented, explaining that Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago by the four greatest witches and wizards of the age, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. 3 of the founders coexisted quite harmoniously. One did not. 3 guesses who, Ron muttered from beside Harry. Binns continued, explaining how Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts, believing magical learning should be kept within all magic families, in other words, purebloods. When the other founders disagreed, Slytherin left the school. Reliable historical sources tell us this much, said Binns. But these honest facts have been obscured by the fanciful legend of the Chamber of Secrets. The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle, of which the other founders knew nothing. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets, unleash the horror within, and use it to purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic. A tense silence followed this statement. Binns looked displeased by the unusual attentiveness of his students. The whole thing is errant nonsense, of course, he said irritably. The school has been searched for evidence of such a chamber many times, by the most learned witches and wizards. It does not exist. But Harry knew better. He had seen the entrance with his own eyes, had watched Ginny disappear into it under the diary's influence. The chamber was real, and if Binns was right about its purpose, then Muggle-born students like Hermione were in grave danger. After class, the trio discussed the legend in hushed tones as they made their way through the crowded corridors. I always knew Salazar Slytherin was a twisted old loony, Ron told Harry and Hermione. But I never knew he started all this pure-blood stuff. I wouldn't be in his house if you paid me. The Sorting Hat almost put me in Slytherin, Harry said thoughtfully, remembering his conversation with Death about choices defining one's path. Ron's jaw dropped. You. But you're not, my mother was Muggle-born, Harry reminded him. If Slytherin's heir is really opening the chamber to target Muggle-borns, I'd be on the list too. This sobering thought stayed with Harry throughout the day. By evening, Dumbledore had still not returned, and Harry found himself increasingly anxious about the basilisk potentially lurking within the school. If the creature emerged from the chamber, students could die before anyone even understood what was happening. His concerns proved prophetic. As the trio headed to dinner that evening, they found themselves caught in a crowd on the second floor. Water was seeping under a door, flooding the corridor. As they pushed forward to see what was causing the commotion, Harry's heart nearly stopped. Foot-high words had been daubed on the wall between 2 windows, shimmering in the light cast by the flaming torches. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware. And hanging by her tail from the torch bracket, stiff as a board with wide, staring eyes, was Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat. The silence broke as students began whispering anxiously. Then Draco Malfoy pushed to the front of the crowd, his cold voice echoing through the corridor, "Enemies of the heir, beware. You'll be next, mudbloods." As Filch arrived and began wailing over his petrified cat, followed quickly by Professors Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape, Harry scanned the gathered students. Ginny stood near the back, her face white with shock, the green aura around her pulsating strongly. The diary was nowhere in sight, but Harry didn't need to see it to know it was responsible for this first attack. Dumbledore announced that Mrs. Norris was not dead but petrified, and could be cured with a mandrake restorative draught once the plants were mature enough. When Filch accused Harry of being responsible, Dumbledore firmly stated that no second year could have performed such dark magic. As the crowd dispersed, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were escorted to their common room by Professor McGonagall, who warned them to be especially cautious in the coming days. The atmosphere in Gryffindor Tower was tense, with students huddled in groups, discussing the ominous message and what it might mean. Harry spotted Ginny sitting alone in a corner, looking pale and drawn. He approached her cautiously, sitting down nearby. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. "You look upset." Ginny jumped slightly, as though startled by his presence. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just, that poor cat. It's awful." Harry nodded, studying her carefully. The diary's influence seemed to have receded somewhat, her eyes were clear and focused, though haunted. "Ginny," he began carefully, "I've noticed you writing in a black diary a lot. Is it special somehow?" Her reaction was immediate and alarming. She paled further, her hands beginning to tremble. "How do you know about my diary?" she whispered. "I've seen you with it at meals sometimes," Harry said, trying to sound casual. "You seem very attached to it." "It's private," she said defensively, then hesitated. "Though sometimes I worry." "Never mind. It's nothing." "What do you worry about?" Harry pressed gently. Ginny bit her lip, clearly torn between secrecy and the need to confide in someone. There are times when I can't remember things. Like where I was or what I was doing. And I wake up with rooster feathers on my robes, or paint on my hands, and I don't know why." Harry's heart raced. This was the opening he needed. "Ginny, I think that diary might be, leave her alone, Potter," came Percy Weasley's sharp voice as he approached them. "Ginny, you should be in bed. It's been a stressful evening for everyone." Ginny nodded, casting an apologetic glance at Harry before hurrying up the girls' staircase. Percy watched her go, then turned to Harry with a disapproving frown. "My sister has been through enough without you interrogating her," he said stiffly. "I was just checking if she was okay," Harry protested. "She seemed upset." "Of course she's upset. The whole school is upset. But Ginny is my responsibility, not yours." Percy adjusted his prefect badge importantly. "I suggest you concern yourself with your own affairs, Potter." As Percy strode away, Harry felt a mixture of frustration and alarm. He'd been so close to getting Ginny to open up about the diary, perhaps even to willingly surrender it. Now he'd have to find another approach, and quickly, before the Horcrux could orchestrate another attack, one that might target a student rather than a cat next time. He rejoined Ron and Hermione, who were debating who the heir of Slytherin might be, with Malfoy as their prime suspect. Harry listened without contributing much, his mind elsewhere. He knew who the true heir was, Tom Riddle, or rather, his preserved memory in the diary. But explaining this knowledge would mean revealing his connection to death and his enhanced perceptions, something he wasn't prepared to do even with his closest friends. Later that night, when the common room had emptied and his dorm mates were asleep, Harry sat by the window, waiting. The familiar chill preceded death's arrival, frost patterns forming on the glass pane seconds before the entity materialized beside him. "It has begun," Death observed without preamble. "The chamber is open. The serpent roams. It petrified Filch's cat," Harry confirmed. "But why not kill it? You said the basilisk kills with its gaze. Mrs. Norris saw the reflection of its eyes in the water on the floor. Indirect contact results in petrification rather than death. Death moved closer, its robed form seeming larger than usual in the confined space. This is but the first strike. The fragment seeks to create fear, to weaken resistance before launching more direct attacks. I tried to talk to Ginny about the diary, Harry said. She admitted to having memory lapses and finding strange things on her clothes, feathers, paint. But Percy interrupted before I could warn her. The brother is protective but misguided. The girl remains the fragment's primary vessel, though its hold weakens when not in direct contact. Death gestured toward the window, where the moon hung like a pale ghost in the night sky. The danger escalates with each passing day. The headmaster has returned. You must speak with him. What do I tell him? That death itself told me about Riddle's diary. That I can see auras around Horcruxes. Tell him what you have observed. Ginny Weasley's strange behavior. Her connection to the diary. The memory lapses she described to you. Death paused. Albus Dumbledore is wise enough to recognize truth, even when delivered through incomplete knowledge. Harry nodded slowly. I'll try to see him tomorrow. Good. There is another matter we must discuss. Death seemed to hesitate, an unusual display from the normally direct entity. The fragment in the diary is but one piece of Tom Riddle's shattered soul. Others exist, hidden throughout Britain. One lies much closer than you realize. Harry frowned. Another Horcrux. Here at Hogwarts. Not precisely. But a fragment nonetheless, connected to you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Before Harry could demand clarification of this cryptic statement, Death continued. When the time is right, all will be revealed. For now, focus on the immediate threat, the diary and the basilisk it controls. How do I destroy a Horcrux? Harry asked, recognizing that Death would not elaborate further on the other fragment it had mentioned. Few substances possess the necessary power. Basilisk venom is one such substance. Ironically, the very creature the diary commands could be its undoing. Death's voice carried a hint of grim amusement. Fiend fire, cursed flame of extraordinary heat and malevolence, is another, though beyond your current magical abilities to control. So I need basilisk venom, Harry concluded. But how do I get that without being killed by the basilisk? That question, Death acknowledged, requires further consideration. Perhaps the headmaster will have insights we lack. With that less than reassuring suggestion, Death began to fade. Seek Dumbledore at dawn, Harry Potter. The balance between life and death grows precarious within these walls. Once alone, Harry returned to his bed, though sleep remained elusive. His mind churned with questions and half-formed plans. The image of Mrs. Norris hanging stiffly from the torch bracket haunted him, a warning of worse to come if he couldn't stop the diary's influence and the basilisk's rampage. Dawn found him red-eyed but determined. He would speak with Dumbledore immediately, consequences be damned. The safety of the school, of his friends, especially Hermione and other Muggle-born students, depended on it. The gargoyle guarding the entrance to Dumbledore's office regarded Harry with stony indifference. I need to see the headmaster, Harry said urgently. It's important, about the Chamber of Secrets. The gargoyle remained immobile. Without the password, Harry was effectively locked out, his crucial information useless. Frustration mounting, he was about to try guessing passwords when a familiar voice spoke behind him. Mr. Potter. What brings you to the headmaster's office at this early hour? Harry turned to find Professor McGonagall observing him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I need to talk to Professor Dumbledore, he said quickly. It's about the chamber and Mrs. Norris and, he hesitated, then plunged ahead, and Tom Riddle's diary. McGonagall's eyebrows rose sharply. Tom Riddle? How do you know that name? Harry realized his mistake too late. He had no plausible explanation for knowing about Riddle's connection to the chamber. I read it somewhere, he improvised poorly. Please, Professor, it's really important that I speak with Dumbledore. McGonagall studied him intently for a long moment, then appeared to reach a decision. Very well, Potter. The headmaster is currently meeting with the Board of Governors, but I expect him to return shortly. Ice Mice, she said to the gargoyle, which sprang aside. Wait in his office. I shall inform him of your presence when he returns. Surprised and relieved, Harry thanked her and ascended the spiral staircase. Dumbledore's circular office was empty save for Fawkes, the magnificent phoenix perched beside the desk. The bird regarded Harry with intelligent eyes as he entered, then trilled a soft, welcoming note. Hello, Fawkes, Harry said, approaching cautiously. I don't suppose you know when Dumbledore will be back. The phoenix merely blinked, offering no insight. Harry took a seat in one of the chairs facing the headmaster's desk, trying to organize his thoughts. He needed to explain his concerns without revealing too much about his connection to death or his enhanced perceptions. As he waited, Harry's gaze wandered over the numerous silver instruments whirring and puffing on various tables, the sleeping portraits of previous headmasters and headmistresses, and the worn sorting hat sitting on a shelf. Seeing the hat reminded him of his own sorting, how it had wanted to place him in Slytherin before he'd objected. On impulse, Harry rose and approached the shelf. The sorting hat was motionless, looking like an ordinary, if extremely tattered, wizard's hat. Harry lifted it carefully, turning it over in his hands. Curious about your sorting, Potter, said a small voice near his ear. Still wondering if I made the right choice. Harry started, nearly dropping the hat. Actually, I was wondering about Tom Riddle, he said after recovering his composure. Did you sort him too? The hat seemed to consider this question. I have sorted every student who has passed through Hogwarts for nearly 1,000 years. Yes, I sorted Tom Marvolo Riddle. A brilliant mind, perhaps the most brilliant I have encountered. He belonged in Slytherin, of course, ambitious, resourceful, determined to prove himself. Like me, Harry said quietly. Similar traits, yes, though your heart is fundamentally different. You chose Gryffindor, and it has served you well. Riddle embraced Slytherin and all it offered him, including knowledge of his illustrious ancestor. Salazar Slytherin, Harry confirmed. Riddle was the heir of Slytherin, wasn't he? He opened the Chamber of Secrets. You know much for one so young, the hat observed. Yes, Riddle discovered his heritage and the secrets it unlocked. But that is old history. More pressing is why it concerns you now. Before Harry could respond, the office door opened. He hastily returned the sorting hat to its shelf as Dumbledore entered, looking grave but unsurprised to find Harry waiting. Professor McGonagall mentioned you wished to speak with me urgently, Harry, said Dumbledore, moving to his desk. Something about Tom Riddle's diary and the Chamber of Secrets? Harry nodded, suddenly nervous. Yes, sir. I think I know what's happening with the chamber, but it's complicated. The most important matters often are, Dumbledore said gently. Please, sit down and tell me what you know. Taking a deep breath, Harry began to explain. He described noticing Ginny Weasley's strange behavior, her attachment to a black diary, and her own admission of memory lapses and unexplained findings. He carefully avoided mentioning death or his ability to see the Horcrux's aura, instead framing his knowledge as observation and deduction. I think the diary is possessing her somehow, he concluded. Making her open the chamber and release whatever's inside, a basilisk, I think, based on what happened to Mrs. Norris. Dumbledore had listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. And you believe this diary belonged to Tom Riddle? How did you come by this information, Harry? This was the difficult part. Harry hesitated, then settled on a half-truth. I had a vision, sir. Of Riddle using the diary to open the chamber 50 years ago. I think the diary preserved his memory somehow, and now it's using Ginny to finish what he started. Dumbledore's piercing blue eyes seemed to see right through this explanation, but he didn't challenge it directly. Visions, Harry. Like the connection you experienced with Professor Quirrell last year when Voldemort was possessing him? Something like that, Harry said, grateful for the offered explanation. I think because of my scar, I sometimes sense things connected to Voldemort. I see. Dumbledore steepled his fingers, looking grave. If what you suggest is true, then Miss Weasley is in grave danger, as is the entire school. A basilisk would indeed explain Mrs. Norris's petrification. Indirect eye contact causes petrification, while direct gaze is fatal. That's what I thought too, Harry said, relieved that Dumbledore was taking him seriously. However, Dumbledore continued, we face several challenges. First, we must confirm your theory about the diary and its influence on Miss Weasley. Second, we must locate and secure the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. And third, we must neutralize the basilisk before it can harm any students. I think the entrance is in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, Harry said, remembering his nighttime observation of Ginny. There's a sink that opens somehow when you speak Parseltongue to it. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose sharply. You've seen this? Harry realized his mistake too late. I followed Ginny one night when she was acting strangely. She went to that bathroom and hissed something at the sink, and it opened up. She went down, but I didn't follow her. A wise decision, Dumbledore said, though his expression suggested he had more questions. Parseltongue is an extremely rare ability, Harry. Tom Riddle possessed it, as did Salazar Slytherin himself. And me, Harry said quietly. I can understand it too. I didn't know what it was until recently, but I've been able to talk to snakes since before I knew I was a wizard. Dumbledore nodded slowly, as though this confirmed something he had long suspected. The connection between you and Voldemort runs deeper than even I had realized. This ability may prove useful in accessing the chamber, though I would prefer you not attempt such an endeavor alone. What about Ginny and the diary? How do we help her? That requires delicacy, Dumbledore said, rising from his desk and beginning to pace. If the diary is indeed what I suspect, a powerful dark artifact containing Tom Riddle's memory, then separating Miss Weasley from it without proper precautions could be dangerous for her. The diary may have created a magical dependency. So what do we do? Harry asked, frustration edging his voice. For now, I will speak with Professor McGonagall about arranging a discreet observation of Miss Weasley. We must confirm your suspicions before taking action. Dumbledore stopped pacing and fixed Harry with an intense gaze. In the meantime, I must ask you to continue as normal, Harry. Attend your classes, participate in Quidditch, give no indication that anything unusual is happening. But sir, if Ginny opens the chamber again, someone could be killed. I am well aware of the risks, Dumbledore said gravely. Additional security measures will be implemented immediately. Professor Sprout assures me the mandrakes are maturing nicely, which means we will soon have a remedy for petrification, should more attacks occur. Harry wanted to argue further but recognized the dismissal in Dumbledore's tone. Yes, sir. But please, hurry. I don't think we have much time. Your concern is noted, Harry, and appreciated. Rest assured that I take this matter with the utmost seriousness. Dumbledore returned to his desk. Now, I believe breakfast is being served in the Great Hall. You should join your classmates before your absence raises questions. Recognizing he would get no further commitments from the headmaster, Harry nodded and headed for the door. As he reached for the handle, Dumbledore spoke again. Harry, one last question. These visions you mentioned. Have you experienced others? Perhaps communications of a different nature? Harry froze, wondering if Dumbledore somehow knew about Death's visitations. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. Merely curious, Dumbledore said lightly, though his eyes remained serious. Your connection to Voldemort is unique. I wonder sometimes what other entities might find you equally interesting. Unsure how to respond, Harry simply nodded noncommittally and left the office, his mind racing with new questions. Did Dumbledore suspect his connection to death? And if so, why hadn't he addressed it directly? As Harry descended the spiral staircase, he couldn't shake the feeling that the headmaster knew far more than he was revealing, about Tom Riddle, about the diary, and perhaps even about Harry's growing abilities as the Master of Death. The weeks following Harry's conversation with Dumbledore brought subtle but noticeable changes to Hogwarts. Additional teachers patrolled the corridors between classes, younger students were escorted to and from common rooms, and the castle's ghosts seemed to be keeping a closer watch on the student body. Despite these precautions, an atmosphere of tension pervaded the school, with rumors and theories about the Chamber of Secrets spreading like fiendfire. Harry observed Ginny whenever possible, noting her increasing pallor, withdrawal from social interactions, and a strengthening of the sickly green aura that surrounded her. The diary itself remained elusive. Ginny kept it well hidden, bringing it out only in private. Harry's attempts to approach her were consistently thwarted by Percy's hovering presence or by Ginny's own evasiveness. Meanwhile, Harry's ability to perceive whispers beyond the veil continued to develop. The spectral voices that had once been overwhelming now filtered through his consciousness like background noise, easily tuned out when necessary. Occasionally, a more insistent voice would break through his mental barriers, usually when he passed certain locations in the castle that seemed to harbor stronger emotional imprints. One such location was a seldom-used corridor on the second floor, not far from Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Whenever Harry walked through this area, he would catch fragments of anguished crying, followed by a girl's terrified gasp and then silence. The impression was so strong that he finally mentioned it to Death during one of their infrequent conversations. "You perceive the final moments of Myrtle Warren," Death confirmed, materializing beside Harry as he stood in the empty corridor after hours. "She was the victim when the chamber was opened 50 years ago, the last time Tom Riddle unleashed the basilisk." "Moaning Myrtle?" Harry asked, surprised. "She was killed by the basilisk?" "Indeed. She encountered the serpent in the bathroom that now bears her spectral name. Direct eye contact. A swift passage into my realm." Death moved along the corridor, its robed form gliding inches above the stone floor. The memory of violent death lingers longest in the physical world. Such echoes can persist for centuries. Harry followed, contemplating this information. So Myrtle would know about the basilisk. Has anyone ever asked her how she died? Few speak with ghosts about their deaths, Death observed. Most find the topic uncomfortable. I should talk to her, Harry decided. She might know something useful about the chamber or the basilisk. Death inclined its hood in what might have been approval. A logical approach. The ghost retains the memories of her mortal life, including her final moments. Though she may be reluctant to revisit such trauma. I'll be careful how I ask, Harry promised. Has there been any change with the diary? Is it getting stronger? The fragment grows in influence daily. It feeds on the girl's life force, her emotions, her secrets. Death stopped before a window overlooking the darkened grounds. The headmaster watches but does not yet act. He gathers information, considers approaches. His caution is both wisdom and potential folly. Why isn't he doing anything? Ginny's getting worse, and the diary could release the basilisk again any day. Albus Dumbledore seeks to understand the nature of the artifact before confronting it. He suspects, correctly, that the diary is more than merely a preserved memory. Death turned toward Harry. He begins to grasp what I have already revealed to you, that Tom Riddle created Horcruxes to anchor his fractured soul to the mortal plane. Harry frowned. But if he knows that, why not just take the diary from Ginny and destroy it? Because destroying a Horcrux is not without consequences. The fragment will fight for survival, potentially harming its host in the process. Death's voice grew softer. Additionally, the headmaster now suspects the diary is not Riddle's only Horcrux. He seeks to confirm this theory before acting. This information gave Harry pause. If Voldemort had created multiple Horcruxes, then destroying just the diary wouldn't eliminate the threat he posed. It would simply remove one anchor, leaving others intact. How many Horcruxes did Riddle make? Harry asked, dreading the answer. That remains unclear even to me, Death admitted. Soul magic obscures my perception, as I have mentioned. But the diary is certainly not the only fragment. There are others, hidden throughout Britain, protected by powerful enchantments. Harry processed this unsettling revelation. So even if we destroy the diary and kill the basilisk, Voldemort could still come back some other way. Eventually, yes. Though each Horcrux destroyed weakens his tether to the mortal plane. Death began to fade slightly, its form becoming more transparent. Dawn approaches. You should return to your dormitory. Speak with the ghost. Learn what she knows of the chamber and the basilisk. Time grows short. With that cryptic warning, Death vanished completely, leaving Harry alone in the corridor with his troubling thoughts. He made his way back to Gryffindor Tower, careful to avoid Filch and Mrs. Norris, who had been restored to health thanks to a Mandrake restorative draft prepared by Professor Snape. The next day brought the first Quidditch match of the season, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin. Despite the tension surrounding the Chamber of Secrets, the school's enthusiasm for Quidditch remained undiminished. The weather was perfect for flying, with clear skies and minimal wind, though Harry found it difficult to focus on catching the snitch with so many other concerns weighing on his mind. His distraction proved costly. 20 minutes into the game, with Gryffindor leading by 30 points, Harry spotted the snitch hovering near the Slytherin goalposts. As he accelerated toward it, a bludger came hurtling in his direction. He dodged it easily, but to his amazement, the bludger changed direction mid-air and came back at him. "Watch yourself, Harry," called George Weasley, swooping past to hit the bludger toward Malfoy. But the ball changed direction again, zeroing in on Harry like a heat-seeking missile. For the next several minutes, Fred and George dedicated themselves to protecting Harry from the rogue bludger, preventing him from searching for the snitch. During a timeout called by Wood, Harry insisted they leave the bludger to him so they could focus on their regular game duties. "Don't be thick," said Fred. "It'll take your head off." But Harry was adamant, and Wood reluctantly agreed. When play resumed, Harry adopted a strategy of complex loop-the-loops and zigzagging across the pitch, keeping one eye on the bludger and the other searching for the snitch. The strategy worked, until it didn't. Hovering for a moment to catch his breath, Harry spotted the snitch again, this time circling above Malfoy's left ear. The Slytherin seeker, too busy mocking Harry's aerial acrobatics, hadn't noticed it. In his moment of distraction, the bludger caught up with Harry, smashing into his elbow with a sickening crack. Pain exploded through his arm, but Harry's determination didn't waver. One-handed, dizzy with agony, he dived for the snitch. Malfoy, seeing Harry's sudden movement, scrambled out of the way, his expression changing from mockery to alarm. Harry took his remaining hand off his broom, reaching for the tiny golden ball. "Argh," he yelled in triumph as his fingers closed around the snitch, but the victory was short-lived. Without hands to grip his broom, Harry lost control, spiraling toward the ground and landing with a thud that drove the breath from his lungs. Through a haze of pain, he heard distant cheering, saw blurry figures running toward him. "Aha," he said vaguely. "We've won." Then everything went sideways as Lockhart appeared, wand drawn, insisting he could fix Harry's broken arm. Despite Harry's protests, the incompetent professor cast his spell, resulting not in a healed bone but in a completely boneless arm that flopped uselessly like a rubber glove filled with jelly. The hospital wing became Harry's home for the night as he faced the unpleasant prospect of regrowing the bones in his arm with Skillgrow, a painful process that would take until morning. As evening fell and the wing quieted, Harry lay awake, his arm throbbing with the bone regeneration process. In the stillness, he became aware of a familiar presence, not death this time, but something else. A soft whispering seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, a voice he hadn't heard since his detention with Lockhart. "Blood. I smell blood. Let me rip. Let me kill." The voice was moving, growing fainter as it traveled upward through the castle. Harry sat bolt upright, straining to track its progress. The basilisk was loose again, hunting through Hogwarts while students slept. Throwing aside his covers, Harry grabbed his glasses and slid out of bed, his useless right arm swinging grotesquely at his side. He had to warn someone, had to find a teacher before the basilisk found a victim. But before he could reach the hospital wing doors, they burst open. Dumbledore backed into the ward, wearing a dressing gown and nightcap, carrying what appeared to be a statue. Professor McGonagall followed a moment later, helping him lay the figure on a bed. Madame Pomfrey, hurrying from her office, gasped upon seeing the patient. "Another attack," Dumbledore said grimly. Minerva found him on the stairs. "There was a bunch of grapes next to him," said Professor McGonagall. "We think he was trying to sneak up here to visit Potter." With a jolt of horror, Harry recognized the petrified form of Colin Creevey, a first-year Gryffindor who had been following Harry around with his camera since the term began. The camera was still clutched in Colin's rigid hands. "Melted," said Dumbledore, examining the device. "All melted inside." "What does this mean, Albus?" Professor McGonagall asked urgently. "It means," said Dumbledore, "that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open again." "But, Albus, surely, who?" McGonagall struggled to articulate the terrible question. "The question is not who," said Dumbledore, his eyes grave. "The question is, how?" From his hidden position behind the curtains of his hospital bed, Harry knew the answer to both questions. The who was Tom Riddle's diary, working through Ginny Weasley. The how was the Horcrux, a piece of Voldemort's soul preserved and now active within Hogwarts. The teachers soon departed with Colin's petrified form, moving him to another ward where Madame Pomfrey could better attend to him. Once alone, Harry sank back onto his bed, his mind racing. The situation had escalated dramatically. First Mrs. Norris, now a student. It was only a matter of time before the basilisk killed someone. Harry resolved to speak with Moaning Myrtle at the earliest opportunity. If she had witnessed her own death by basilisk, she might have crucial information about how it moved through the school and where the chamber's entrance was located, information that could help stop the attacks before they turned deadly. With this determination fixed in his mind, Harry drifted into an uneasy sleep, his dreams filled with giant serpents, shattered souls, and death's solemn warning, "Time grows short." News of Colin Creevey's petrification spread through the school like wildfire, despite the staff's attempts to downplay the incident. A black market in protective amulets, talismans, and other dubious magical defenses sprang up among the student body, with even Neville Longbottom purchasing a large, evil-smelling green onion, a pointed purple crystal, and a rotting newt tail before his fellow Gryffindors pointed out that he was in no danger, being a pureblood. "They went for Filch first," Neville said fearfully. "And everyone knows I'm almost a squib." Harry, finally released from the hospital wing with his arm fully healed, found the atmosphere of fear and suspicion difficult to navigate. His ability to speak Parseltongue remained a closely guarded secret, known only to Ron, Hermione, and Dumbledore. If word got out that he shared this rare ability with Salazar Slytherin, Harry suspected he might face accusations of being the heir himself. His opportunity to speak with Moaning Myrtle came unexpectedly during potions class. Draco Malfoy's sabotage of Hermione's cauldron resulted in her being splashed with swelling solution, causing her face to balloon alarmingly. In the ensuing chaos, Harry managed to distract Snape while Ron sneaked into the professor's private stores to obtain Boomslang skin and bicorn horn, ingredients they needed for the polyjuice potion Hermione had suggested brewing to infiltrate Slytherin House and question Malfoy about the chamber. After escorting Hermione to the hospital wing for the deflating draft, Harry decided to use his free period to visit Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The out-of-order girls' lavatory was on the second floor, conveniently deserted due to Myrtle's unpleasant habit of wailing and flooding the place when disturbed. As Harry pushed open the door, he was greeted by the sound of pitiful moaning coming from the farthest stall. "Myrtle," he called tentatively. "It's Harry Potter. Can I talk to you?" The moaning stopped abruptly, replaced by a suspicious sniffle. "What do you want?" came Myrtle's gloomy voice. "Come to throw something else at me?" Throw something? No, I just wanted to ask you about how you died. There was a splash as Myrtle emerged from her toilet, looking surprisingly pleased despite her perpetually miserable expression. Oh, that's a first, she said, floating closer. Usually people just ask me to go away or stop flooding the bathroom. No one's ever been interested in my death before. Harry approached carefully, aware that Myrtle's moods could shift rapidly. I heard it happened about 50 years ago, he said. Here in this bathroom? Myrtle's face lit up with ghoulish delight. Oh, it was dreadful, she said with relish. It happened right here in this very stall. I'd hidden because Olive Hornby was teasing me about my glasses. I was crying, and then I heard somebody come in. Who was it? Harry asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. I don't know. I was upset. But they said something funny, a different language, I think. Anyway, I realized it was a boy, so I opened the door to tell him to go away and use his own toilet, and then, Myrtle's face grew solemn, her voice dropping to a whisper, I died. Just like that? How? No idea, said Myrtle in hushed tones. I just remember seeing a pair of great, big, yellow eyes. My whole body sort of seized up, and then I was floating away. She looked dreamily at Harry. And then I came back. I was determined to haunt Olive Hornby, you see. Oh, she was sorry she'd ever laughed at my glasses. Where exactly did you see the eyes? Harry asked, looking around the bathroom. Somewhere there, said Myrtle, pointing vaguely toward the sink in front of her toilet. Harry approached the sink, examining it carefully. It looked ordinary enough, white porcelain, slightly tarnished silver taps. Then he noticed something, a tiny snake scratched into the side of one of the copper taps. That taps never worked, said Myrtle brightly when she saw what he was looking at. Harry tried turning it anyway, confirming Myrtle's statement. Then, on impulse, he focused on the carved snake and attempted something he'd never consciously done before, speaking Parseltongue. Open, he said, but it came out as normal English. He tried again, this time visualizing the tiny snake as alive, moving. Open, he repeated, and this time a strange hissing escaped his lips. Immediately, the tap glowed with a brilliant white light and began to spin. The sink began to move, sinking right out of sight to reveal a large pipe wide enough for a man to slide into, the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Myrtle gasped behind him. That's it. That's where the eyes were, she exclaimed, floating backward in alarm. Are you going down there? It's where I died, you know. Harry stared into the dark pipe, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He'd found the entrance, confirmed his theory. But going down alone would be foolhardy at best, suicidal at worst. A fully grown basilisk waited below, along with whatever remained of Tom Riddle's diary-bound consciousness. Not right now, he told Myrtle, backing away. But I need to tell Dumbledore about this. It's important. Suit yourself, Myrtle said with a sniff. But if you die down there, you're welcome to share my toilet. Harry managed a weak smile at this peculiar offer, then spoke in Parseltongue again, this time saying, close. The sink rose back into position, sealing the entrance as though it had never opened. Heart pounding, Harry left the bathroom and headed straight for Dumbledore's office. He had concrete evidence now, the location of the chamber, confirmation of the basilisk from its only fatality, and a way to access the hidden passages beneath the school. Surely Dumbledore would act now, would help retrieve the diary from Ginny and destroy both it and the monster it controlled before anyone else was harmed. But Harry never reached the headmaster's office. As he rounded a corner on the first floor, he nearly collided with Professor McGonagall, who was escorting a pale, vacant-eyed Ginny Weasley toward the hospital wing. Potter. What are you doing out of class? McGonagall demanded, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. She seemed preoccupied, her attention primarily on Ginny, who didn't appear to register Harry's presence at all. I was looking for Professor Dumbledore, Harry said, his gaze fixed on Ginny. The green aura surrounding her had intensified dramatically, pulsating with malevolent energy. The diary was close, perhaps in her robes or bag. "The headmaster has been called away to the ministry again," said McGonagall, her lips thinning with disapproval. "The Board of Governors is discussing the recent incidents. But I know where the Chamber of Secrets is." Harry blurted out. "And what's inside it?" "It's a basilisk, and it's using the pipes to move around the school. That's why no one sees it." McGonagall stared at him, momentarily speechless. Then her expression hardened. "Potter, these are serious claims. What evidence do you have?" "I just spoke with Moaning Myrtle. She's the student who died last time the chamber was opened. She saw yellow eyes by the sink in her bathroom, and I found the entrance. It opens with Parseltongue." If Harry had hoped to impress McGonagall with this revelation, he was sorely disappointed. Her face paled, and she gripped Ginny's shoulder more tightly. "Parseltongue," she repeated faintly. "And how would you know that, Potter?" Too late, Harry realized his mistake. He'd revealed his ability to speak the language of serpents, an admission that would raise immediate suspicions given the chamber's connection to Slytherin. I can speak it," he admitted reluctantly. "I have since before I knew I was a wizard. But that's not important right now. What matters is that the chamber is real, and it's open, and if we don't do something, someone's going to die." McGonagall seemed to struggle between skepticism and the undeniable logic of Harry's explanation. "This is a matter for the headmaster," she said finally. "When he returns, but that could be too late." Harry protested. "The basilisk is already loose in the school. And," he hesitated, then plunged ahead, "it's being controlled by Tom Riddle's diary, which has been possessing Ginny." At this, Ginny's vacant expression flickered briefly, a flash of terror crossing her features before the emptiness returned. McGonagall, however, looked thunderstruck. "Tom Riddle," she whispered. "How do you know that name, Potter?" "It doesn't matter how I know," Harry said, frustration mounting. "What matters is that Ginny has the diary, and it's using her to open the chamber and control the basilisk. We need to take it from her before it makes her release the monster again." McGonagall's gaze shifted to Ginny, who stood unnaturally still beside her, eyes unfocused. "Miss Weasley was found wandering the corridors in a state of confusion," she said slowly. "She claimed to have no memory of the past several hours." "That's the diary's influence," Harry insisted. "It makes her forget what it forces her to do." "Please, Professor, you have to believe me." After what seemed an eternity, McGonagall nodded. "To the hospital wing, Potter. We'll have Madame Pomfrey examine Miss Weasley, and I'll send for Professor Snape. If what you say is true, we may need his expertise in dark artifacts." Harry followed McGonagall and the docile Ginny to the hospital wing, relief and anxiety warring within him. He'd been partially believed, at least enough for McGonagall to take precautions, but would it be sufficient? Would Snape recognize the diary as a Horcrux if they found it? And what if the diary sensed their intentions and forced Ginny to release the basilisk before they could secure it? These questions remained unanswered as they entered the hospital wing, where Madame Pomfrey was tending to Hermione, whose face had returned to its normal size after the swelling solution incident. The matron looked up in surprise as they entered. "Another patient, Minerva?" she asked, eyes narrowing at Ginny's vacant expression. "What's happened to Miss Weasley?" "We're not entirely certain, Poppy," said McGonagall tensely. "Mr. Potter has a rather alarming theory involving possession and a cursed diary. I'd like you to examine Miss Weasley while I fetch Severus." Madame Pomfrey's eyebrows shot up, but she nodded briskly. "Of course. Bring her here, near Miss Granger. Mr. Potter, you may wait over there." She gestured to a chair across the ward. As McGonagall departed to find Snape, Hermione caught Harry's eye, her expression questioning. He moved closer to her bed, keeping his voice low. "It's the chamber," he whispered. "I found the entrance in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. And the diary we saw Malfoy's dad slip to Ginny, it's possessing her, making her open the chamber and release the basilisk. Hermione's eyes widened. A basilisk. Of course, that explains everything. The petrifications instead of deaths, the spiders fleeing the castle, the roosters being killed. Roosters? Harry frowned, not following this last connection. The crow of a rooster is fatal to a basilisk, Hermione explained. It would make sense for the heir, or whoever's controlling the basilisk, to eliminate that threat. Hagrid mentioned his roosters were being mysteriously killed, remember? Harry did remember, and another piece of the puzzle clicked into place, Ginny's confession about finding rooster feathers on her robes. The diary had been using her to eliminate any threat to its monster. Their conversation was interrupted by Madame Pomfrey, who had settled Ginny on a bed and was performing diagnostic spells over her rigid form. Peculiar, she muttered. No physical ailments, but her magical signature is fluctuating. Almost as if, she broke off as the hospital wing doors burst open. Professor Snape strode in, his black robes billowing behind him, followed by McGonagall looking grim. Possession, Minerva tells me, Snape said without preamble, approaching Ginny's bed. And a diary belonging to Tom Riddle. His dark eyes flickered toward Harry, unreadable but intense. An interesting theory, Potter. Your source? Harry hesitated. I observed Ginny's behavior. The memory lapses, the strange actions. And I saw Mr. Malfoy slip the diary into her cauldron at flourish and blots. Snape's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. Indeed. And how did you connect this diary to Tom Riddle, a student who attended Hogwarts 50 years ago? Again, Harry found himself unable to reveal his true source of information. Research, he said vaguely. About the last time the chamber was opened. Snape clearly didn't believe this explanation, but he turned his attention to Ginny, removing his wand and murmuring complex incantations. The air around Ginny's bed shimmered with faint colors, predominantly green, Harry noticed, matching the aura he could see surrounding her. There is indeed a foreign magical influence at work, Snape confirmed after several minutes of examination. Powerful dark magic, beyond anything a first year could generate independently. He turned to McGonagall. We should search her possessions for this diary Potter mentioned. McGonagall nodded grimly. I'll have the house elves bring her trunk from Gryffindor Tower. No need, said Snape, his gaze returning to Ginny. If the object is as powerful as it appears, she will not have left it unattended. He addressed Ginny directly, his voice taking on a strangely compelling quality. Miss Weasley, where is your diary? Ginny's vacant expression didn't change, but her hand moved slowly to her robe pocket. From it, she withdrew a small black book, ordinary in appearance except for the name, T.M. Riddle, stamped in faded gold on the cover. Harry felt a wave of revulsion as the diary emerged. The sickly green aura surrounding it intensified, tendrils of energy visibly connecting it to Ginny even as she held it out toward Snape. Before the potion's master could take it, however, something unexpected happened. Ginny's expression changed, a malevolent smile replacing her blank look. When she spoke, her voice was deeper, colder, not her own. Too late, she said, and Harry recognized the voice of Tom Riddle from his visions. The chamber is open. The heir has returned. And you will not stop us this time. With a sudden, violent movement, Ginny threw the diary to the floor. Ink began to pour from its pages, forming a rapidly expanding pool around it. McGonagall drew her wand, but before she could cast a spell, Ginny collapsed, the malevolent presence seemingly withdrawing from her. Simultaneously, the hospital wing doors slammed shut of their own accord, and a wind rose from nowhere, extinguishing the torches and plunging the ward into semi-darkness. From the inky pool on the floor, a figure began to form, misty and insubstantial at first, but gradually solidifying into the shape of a tall, handsome young man in Hogwarts robes bearing the Slytherin crest. Tom Riddle, Snape breathed, his normally impassive face showing genuine alarm. The figure smiled coldly, his form becoming more solid with each passing second. "Professor Snape," he acknowledged. "Professor McGonagall. How pleasant to make your acquaintance again, or for the first time, from my perspective." McGonagall had her wand trained on Riddle, her hand steady despite the shock evident in her expression. "What have you done to Miss Weasley?" "Nothing permanent, yet." Riddle's gaze moved to Ginny's unconscious form. "She's been a most useful ally, pouring her soul into my diary for months. Her fears, her ambitions, her deepest secrets, all have fed my strength, allowing me to pour a little of my soul back into her." "A possession bond," Snape stated flatly. "You've been controlling her actions." "Precisely. Though I prefer to think of it as guidance." Riddle turned, his gaze falling on Harry. "And here he is, the famous Harry Potter. The boy who somehow defeated Lord Voldemort as an infant. Ginny wrote so much about you. I've been very eager to meet you." Harry stood his ground, meeting Riddle's gaze. "I know what you are," he said quietly. "A memory preserved in a diary. A fragment of Voldemort's soul." Riddle's handsome features registered surprise, then calculation. "You know more than you should, Harry Potter. How, I wonder?" Before Harry could respond, Snape intervened, his wand now directed at the diary itself rather than at Riddle's manifesting form. "Enough conversation. Containment is our priority." He cast a non-verbal spell that produced a transparent dome over the diary, but Riddle merely laughed. "Too late, Professor. I've drawn enough life force from the girl to act independently now. And my basilisk is already loose in the school." As if to confirm his words, a distant but unmistakable voice echoed through the walls, "Kill, time to kill." "You hear it, don't you, Harry?" Riddle asked, smiling as he noted Harry's reaction to the voice. "The language of Slytherin. We share that rare gift, you and I. Another fascinating connection between us." McGonagall paled. "The basilisk, it's in the school now?" "Moving through the pipes, as Potter suggested." "Very good, Professor," Riddle said mockingly. "Salazar Slytherin's noble beast, created to purge the school of Muggleborns. And now, after 50 years, it will complete its sacred task, beginning with the mudblood in this very room." His gaze shifted to Hermione, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, her eyes wide with terror. Snape moved to place himself between Hermione's bed and Riddle, his expression murderous. "You will not harm any student while I stand," he said, voice deadly quiet. "Noble sentiment," Riddle said dismissively. "But you cannot fight what you cannot see. And you cannot kill what is already beyond death." With these ominous words, Riddle began to fade, his form becoming transparent once more. As he disappeared, the diary beneath the containment charm burst into flames, green fire consuming the small book until nothing remained but ash. For a moment, relief flooded Harry, until he realized what had happened. The diary hadn't been destroyed, it had transformed, releasing Riddle's essence fully into the school. And somewhere within Hogwarts, a basilisk now hunted freely, no longer tethered to Ginny's unconscious control. The temperature in the hospital wing plummeted suddenly, frost forming on the windows. Death materialized beside Harry, visible to all present judging by the shocked expressions on the professors' faces. "The fragment has escaped its prison," Death declared, its resonant voice filling the ward. "It has become corporeal through the girl's life force. A dangerous development." McGonagall had gone rigid with shock, her wand still raised but now trembling slightly. Snape, however, showed remarkable composure, his dark eyes narrowing as he studied the robed entity. "What manner of being are you?" he demanded. "One who exists beyond your comprehension, Severus Snape," Death replied calmly. "I am that which awaits all living things. I am the end of every journey, the silence after the final heartbeat." "Death," Snape whispered, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Indeed." Death moved toward Ginny's bed, skeletal hand hovering above her pale face. The girl lives, though weakened. The fragment did not take all it could have, an error born of haste and arrogance. Harry stepped forward. Can you stop Riddle? Or the basilisk? Death's hood turned toward him. I cannot directly intervene in matters of life, Master of Death. That is not my role. I observe. I collect. I guide. But I do not determine when or how endings occur. Master of Death. McGonagall repeated faintly, looking between Harry and the robed figure with growing comprehension. A title bestowed when appropriate, Death said simply. Harry Potter has earned such designation through means beyond ordinary understanding. Snape's gaze sharpened further, studying Harry with new intensity. The cloak, he said softly. The invisibility cloak. It's one of the Hallows. Harry nodded, surprised by Snape's knowledge but not bothering to deny it. The situation had moved beyond secrets and half-truths. The fragment must be destroyed before it fully materializes, Death continued. It has not yet achieved complete physical form, despite appearances. It remains tethered to the girl's life force, though no longer requiring the diary as a conduit. And the basilisk? Snape asked. A creature of flesh and blood, despite its magical nature. It can be killed by conventional means, though few would survive the attempt. Death gestured toward Harry. My master possesses certain advantages in this regard. McGonagall found her voice at last. Surely you're not suggesting that Potter confront a basilisk? He's a child. He is the master of death, Death corrected. And he speaks the tongue of serpents. Both qualities may prove crucial in the coming confrontation. Harry felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. It seemed he was destined to face the basilisk after all, despite Dumbledore's absence and the professor's obvious reluctance. I found the entrance to the chamber, he reminded them. In Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. I can open it with Parseltongue. Absolutely not, McGonagall said firmly. We will evacuate the school and send for ministry assistance. Aurors trained in combating dark creatures, time is a luxury you no longer possess, Death interrupted. The fragment grows stronger by the moment. The basilisk hunts even now. External aid will arrive too late to prevent casualties. As if to emphasize this point, a distant scream echoed through the castle, followed by the sound of running footsteps and panicked voices. McGonagall and Snape exchanged grim looks. We must contain the situation, Snape said decisively. Minerva, organize the evacuation through the house heads. I will attempt to locate the basilisk and delay it until help arrives. And what of Riddle? McGonagall asked. If what? Death says is true, he's drawing power from Miss Weasley even now. I believe, said Snape, his gaze moving to Harry, that is where Mr. Potter's unexpected abilities may prove useful. The connection between Potter and the Dark Lord has always been unique. Harry nodded, understanding what Snape was implying. I need to go to the chamber. That's where Riddle will return, it's his domain, the place where his power is strongest. Potter, you cannot seriously intend to, McGonagall began. I don't see much choice, Professor, Harry interrupted, surprising himself with his own calm. I'm the only one who can open the chamber. And according to Death, I have some protection against Riddle and the basilisk that others don't. Death inclined its hood. The Master of Death speaks truth. His connection to my realm provides certain immunities. Not invulnerability, but advantages nonetheless. A moment of tense silence followed this declaration. Then Snape spoke, his voice carefully controlled. Potter will not go alone, he said. I will accompany him to the chamber entrance. Once inside. He hesitated, clearly reluctant to admit what they all knew. He may indeed be better equipped to proceed than I would be. McGonagall looked as though she wanted to protest further, but another scream from elsewhere in the castle seemed to make the decision for her. Very well, she said, lips white with strain. I will organize the evacuation and send word to Dumbledore. Severus, escort Potter to this bathroom entrance, but for Merlin's sake, exercise extreme caution. As McGonagall hurried from the hospital wing, Snape turned to Madame Pomfrey, who had been tending to Ginny throughout the conversation. Keep Miss Weasley here. Monitor her condition closely. If she weakens suddenly, send word immediately. It may indicate Riddle drawing more heavily on her life force. The matron nodded grimly, her usually unflappable demeanor shaken by the extraordinary events unfolding in her ward. Snape then addressed Harry directly. Potter, you will follow my instructions precisely. We proceed to the bathroom, assess the entrance, and determine the safest course of action. No heroics, no reckless Gryffindor charges into danger. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Harry agreed, recognizing that Snape's stern manner masked genuine concern. What about me? Hermione asked, speaking for the first time since Riddle's manifestation. I want to help. You will remain here under Madame Pomfrey's protection, Snape said firmly. The basilisk specifically targets Muggleborns. Your presence would be an unnecessary risk. Hermione looked ready to argue, but Harry caught her eye. He's right, Hermione. Stay with Ginny. If anything changes with her, it might give us information about what's happening with Riddle. She nodded reluctantly. Be careful, Harry. Basilisks are incredibly dangerous, their gaze kills instantly, and their venom is among the most lethal substances known to wizardkind. A fact I am well aware of, Miss Granger, Snape said dryly. Come, Potter. Time is indeed of the essence. As they prepared to leave, Harry turned to Death, who had remained silent during the planning. Will you be there? In the chamber? I am everywhere, Harry Potter, Death replied simply. But yes, I shall maintain a more perceptible presence during your confrontation. Though remember, I cannot directly intervene. The choices, the actions, the consequences, all must be yours. Harry nodded, understanding the limitation yet drawing comfort from the entity's promise to remain nearby. With a final glance at Hermione and the unconscious Ginny, he followed Snape from the hospital wing, bracing himself for the confrontation that awaited in Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. The corridors of Hogwarts had descended into controlled chaos. Prefects were leading lines of frightened students toward the Great Hall, professors were securing classrooms and sealing off sections of the castle, and ghosts drifted urgently between floors, relaying information and searching for the basilisk. Harry and Snape moved against this tide, drawing curious and alarmed glances as they hurried toward the second floor. Snape's expression was grim, his wand held ready as they navigated the emptying hallways. Potter, he said in a low voice as they climbed a moving staircase, this relationship you have with death. How long has it existed? Since Christmas, Harry answered, seeing no reason to lie. When I got the invisibility cloak. Snape's lips thinned. The headmaster gave you the cloak. Did he know what it truly was? I think so. We discussed it after the thing with Quirrell and the philosopher's stone. Harry hesitated, then added, Death called my cloak one of 3 Hallows. Said they were gifts it gave to 3 brothers a long time ago. The Deathly Hallows, Snape murmured, looking troubled. Artifacts of legend, sought by many but found by few. And you possess one, making you, what? Death's chosen representative? Its master, according to Death. Though I still don't really understand what that means. Harry ducked beneath a tapestry, following Snape through a shortcut to the second floor. It's been teaching me things, how to see beyond the veil, how to recognize Horcruxes. Snape stopped so abruptly that Harry nearly collided with his back. The potion's master turned, his face paler than usual, dark eyes intense. Horcruxes, he repeated, the word barely a whisper. The diary was a Horcrux. You're certain? Harry nodded. Death said Voldemort made several. Split his soul through murder to anchor himself to life. That's why he didn't die when the killing curse rebounded. Something like horror flickered across Snape's face before his expression closed again. This information, the headmaster must be told immediately. He might already know, Harry suggested. Death said Dumbledore suspected the diary wasn't Riddle's only Horcrux. Snape seemed to process this, then resumed walking at an even more urgent pace. The situation is graver than I anticipated. If the Dark Lord created multiple Horcruxes. He didn't finish the thought, but Harry understood the implication. Destroying the diary, or rather, the manifestation it had produced, wouldn't end the threat of Voldemort's return. It would merely delay the inevitable. They reached the entrance to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, finding the door ajar and the floor wet, as usual. Snape gestured for Harry to stay behind him as they entered, wand raised defensively. Moaning Myrtle hovered anxiously near her usual toilet, looking unusually agitated. "Oh, it's you again," she said when she spotted Harry. "And you've brought a professor this time. Smart. Something terrible just happened." "What happened, Miss Warren?" Snape asked sharply, using Myrtle's real name. Myrtle seemed pleased at being addressed so formally. The sink opened again. All on its own. And something huge went down the pipe. I couldn't see what, exactly, but it made a horrible slithering sound. The basilisk returning to the chamber, Snape concluded, turning to Harry. "Show me the entrance." Harry approached the circular arrangement of sinks, locating the one with the tiny snake scratched into the copper tap. Focusing on the serpentine image, he hissed, "Open," in Parseltongue. As before, the tap glowed with brilliant white light and began to spin. The sink descended out of sight, revealing the large pipe leading into darkness below. A damp, musty smell rose from the opening, along with distant echoes that suggested vast spaces deep underground. Snape examined the entrance without touching it, casting several detection spells that produced complex patterns of light around the pipe. "Ancient magic," he murmured. "Slytherin's work, without doubt. The pipe appears to descend at least 50 feet before leveling out. So we just slide down?" Harry asked, peering into the darkness. "A controlled descent would be preferable," Snape said dryly. He cast another spell, creating what appeared to be invisible steps within the pipe. This should provide a more dignified entry, though the spell may dissipate once we're beyond the castle's main foundation. Parseltongue magic often rejects external modifications. Harry nodded, impressed despite himself by Snape's practical approach. The professor had shown none of the stunned disbelief or hesitation that McGonagall had displayed when faced with Death's appearance and Harry's designation as its master. Instead, Snape had quickly adapted to the situation, treating these extraordinary revelations as simply new factors to consider in addressing the crisis. "I'll go first," Harry said, placing a foot carefully on the first invisible step. "You will not," Snape countered, moving in front of him. "Master of Death or not, Potter, you remain a student under my protection." Before Harry could argue, Snape began descending into the pipe, his wand illuminating the way. Harry followed, finding the invisible steps solid beneath his feet despite their complete transparency. The pipe curved and twisted, occasionally branching into smaller offshoots that Snape marked with floating balls of light to ensure they could find their way back. After what seemed an eternity of descent, the pipe leveled out into a stone tunnel large enough to stand in. The floor was littered with small animal bones that crunched underfoot, and the walls glistened with moisture. "Lumos Maxima," Snape intoned, sending a ball of light ahead to illuminate their path. "Stay close, Potter. Do not look directly ahead if you hear any movement. Use the reflection in puddles if necessary, but otherwise keep your eyes downward." They proceeded cautiously through the tunnel, every sense alert for signs of the basilisk. Harry found himself straining to hear the distinctive Parseltongue voice that had accompanied the creature's previous movements through the castle, but the tunnel remained eerily silent save for the sound of their own footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. After several minutes of tense progress, the tunnel curved sharply, and Snape halted abruptly, raising a hand in warning. Harry stopped beside him, eyes carefully directed at the ground as instructed. "Something ahead," Snape whispered. Large. Stationary. Harry risked a glance at the illuminated area before them, keeping his gaze low. A vast, serpentine shape lay across the tunnel floor, but as they watched, neither moving nor breathing, Harry realized it wasn't the basilisk itself. It's a skin, he said softly. The basilisk must have shed it. Snape moved forward to examine the discarded skin, which was a vivid, poisonous green color and had to be at least 20 feet long. Recently shed, he observed. Within the past week. And this is not from a fully grown specimen, which suggests the actual basilisk may be considerably larger. This was not comforting information. Harry swallowed hard, trying not to imagine facing a serpent even more massive than the enormous skin before them. As they carefully stepped around the shed skin and continued deeper into the tunnel, the air grew warmer and drier. The passage began to curve more frequently, and Harry had the distinct impression they were following a serpent's natural path, winding their way beneath the foundations of Hogwarts toward some ancient destination. Finally, they reached a solid wall carved with two entwined serpents, their eyes set with great, glinting emeralds that seemed to watch the intruders with malevolent intelligence. The chamber entrance proper, Snape murmured, studying the carvings with reluctant admiration. Slytherin's craftsmanship was remarkable, whatever his flaws in ideology. Harry stepped forward, again focusing on the serpentine images and willing himself to speak their language. Open, he hissed in Parseltongue. The serpents parted as the wall cracked open, the halves sliding smoothly out of sight to reveal a long, dimly lit chamber beyond. Tall stone pillars carved with more serpents rose to support a ceiling lost in darkness, casting long shadows through the greenish gloom that pervaded the space. Snape cast another illumination charm, revealing the full grandeur of Slytherin's hidden domain. The chamber stretched before them, vast and cathedral-like, with a towering statue of Salazar Slytherin himself dominating the far end. Between the pillars, shallow channels of water reflected the eerie light, and the stone floor was inlaid with serpentine patterns that seemed to writhe in the shifting shadows. Remarkable, Snape breathed, momentarily forgetting their perilous situation in the face of such historical significance. Few living eyes have seen this place. And some died for the privilege, came a cold, amused voice from the shadows near Slytherin's statue. Tom Riddle stepped into the light, his form more solid than in the hospital wing, though still with a faint translucence around the edges. He looked like a ghost becoming corporeal, gaining substance with each passing moment. Professor Snape, Riddle acknowledged with a mocking bow. I'm flattered by your interest in my ancestors' architectural achievements. And Harry Potter, the boy who lived. How fitting that you should come to face me in the chamber where my true self was reborn to my heritage. Snape pushed Harry slightly behind him, wand trained on Riddle. Your true self became a monster feared by the entire wizarding world, he said coldly. A fate you still might avoid, Riddle, if you cease drawing life from the Weasley girl. Riddle laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally through the vast chamber. Advice from Severus Snape, how unexpected. Tell me, Professor, do you offer this counsel to all your students, or only those who go on to become the greatest dark wizard of all time? You are not Lord Voldemort, Harry said, stepping out from behind Snape. You're just a piece of him, a fragment preserved in a diary. The real Voldemort is still out there, weak and formless. Riddle's handsome features hardened. I am Lord Voldemort, he spat, then calmed himself with visible something went wrong with this response, please try again. Ch2 Bro Chapter 3, The Stone of Life and Death. As the school year progresses, Harry learns that Voldemort is after the Philosopher's Stone. With his new connection to death, Harry realizes the stone represents an abomination to the natural order. Death reveals it wants Harry to prevent the stone from being used and explains the full history of the Hallows. In the final confrontation in the chamber with the Mirror of Erist, Harry faces both Quirrell/Voldemort and must make a choice about the stone. Death appears during this confrontation, forcing a final reckoning. Harry chooses to destroy the stone rather than use it, proving himself worthy of the title Master of Death. The story concludes with Harry accepting his role but deciding to use it on his own terms, with Death acknowledging Harry's unique perspective on life and mortality. This outline provides a foundation for the story while leaving room for the detailed character development, magical elements, and plot twists that will be fleshed out in the actual writing. Each chapter will build upon the previous one while introducing new challenges and revelations, maintaining a fast pace and engaging narrative throughout. I'll wait to be prompted to begin writing Chapter 1. The Master of Death, a Harry Potter tale, story outline plot overview. When Death incarnate materializes at Hogwarts to reclaim its stolen Hallows, it makes a shocking declaration: 11-year-old Harry Potter is the true Master of Death. This unexpected designation transforms Harry's already unusual first year at Hogwarts, as he must navigate this ancient power while facing the immediate threat of Voldemort's quest for immortality through the Philosopher's Stone. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.